Sadistic Penguin Studios presents the At the Show podcast with Tom Yumper Garcia.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
And Tony Chalsy Burt.
I don't know this industry jargon, YP, MP, whatever, okay? All I know is that I cannot get a record contract. We cannot get a record contract unless I take these tapes.
It's almost time, so grab a drink, get your popcorn ready, and join the film discussion with two guys from Chicago talking movies.
Welcome, everyone, to the At the Show podcast presented to you by the Sadistic Penguin Studios. I'm one of your co-hosts, Tom Yumper Garcia, and I'm with my other co-host, Tony, a.k.a. Chalsy, a.k.a. the Sugar Baggy, Burton. Burt, how you doing, my man?
I am doing great, my friend. I am glad to be here.
So am I. This week has sucked extremely, but I'm always happy to talk movies, man.
Me too. This is, for me, going to be a huge healing process. I lost a pet of mine of 17 years a day ago. And this, honestly, the reason we talk movies and the reason I talk everything is just to have a good time and forget some of those other things, like you said, the way the week has gone.
Yeah, my man. I'm sorry to hear that. What was it? Dog?
Well, that's the thing. It was my turtle.
Oh, man.
And you know, and I've talked about this a lot, like almost like a stand-up joke. Like I take it very seriously, but there's also people who are like, it's just a turtle. But you know, this turtle has traveled to California with me, and honestly, her brother passed away last year. It's 17 years. So, you know, but that being said, this is kind of like, you know, a cheers to and honestly, you're gonna laugh at this really quick. The turtles' names were Lily and DeRosa after Ted Lilly and Mark DeRosa, Cubs players from 2000 and
late 2010s.
You know, I mean, and that's how long, you know, I had them and stuff like that.
Nice.
Pretty cool. Pretty awesome.
I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Cool.
Yeah, losing a pet always sucks.
It does.
We lost our Dotson last year.
I love Dotson.
No, not last year. Maybe like 4 years ago before we got Max. Yeah, it sucked.
Oh,
but, man, sorry to hear that, man. Hopefully we can cheer you up with some movie talk today. Yeah,
let's do it.
Cool. So let's go into our first segment, Tone. Let's get into what we have. Excuse me. What we have been watching, and I cannot find the thing. Wow, this is the first time for me. Did they delete it off our thing?
What happened?
Oh, I found it. Here we go. That's my bad. Totally unprepared.
All right.
All right, here we go.
That's a meme. And also, what were you just watching?
So what have you been watching this week, Tone?
Well, this week, to coincide, which we like to do a lot here at the show, to coincide with what is coming up and what is happening, we have Dune 2 coming out this next week. So I went back and revisited Dune 1, or Dune, the Dune that was released a few years back, because the first time I watched it was not a fan. Second time I watched it, didn't make it through. This time I watched it, I'm in love. I can't wait. You say, let's go see it. I was like, yes. Sometimes that's how I am with movies. You know, the first time I maybe was sitting down and watching it, I might not have been in the mood or something, but just this last time I really took to it and I enjoyed it. What did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I love the aesthetics of the film, basically the way it looked. I remember the older version, the original version. Doesn't really hold up too well, and it's not really a great film. I always remember that one being used for like clips of being made fun of. Father. But now, like, seeing this new updated version, I really like it. It's kind of crazy that the newer remake is better than the original, looking wise and story wise. I'm also a huge fan of Oscar Isaac, even though he has a small role in this film. I thought it was done beautifully. Really excited for the sequel, even though they're handing out those crazy popcorn tops on their popcorn box.
They sure are, aren't they? And
Yeah.
the second movie that I watched was a new one, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, a newer horror movie that came out this last year, kind of set back from a long time ago. A ship, pretty much, honestly, it's a chapter from Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, and in a roundabout. And honestly, I enjoyed it. It was atmospheric for what it was going for. A buddy of mine watched it too. He said that the what was his words is that he didn't care about he loved the vampire but didn't care about the people in the story. And that always makes me laugh because it's like, are you really looking to care about the people on The Last Voyage of the Demeter? Or are we just looking for a good old vampire movie? And it's I think it holds up for that. So have you checked it out yet?
No, I haven't seen this one. Actually, I get a lot of my horror movie love from my mom. Her like favorite thing is Halloween. We watch horror movies with her all the time. She actually saw this movie. She says it was decent. I gotta check it out. It's on my list. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Actually, I was going it just went up on Paramount Plus, and I actually was gonna pay the $5 for it, but I was like, it's on here for free now, so gave it a chance. And again, it's pretty much what your mom said. I mean, it's a good Saturday night, put your feet up. You're not gonna watch, honestly, it's not Demolition Man, but it's definitely just something to watch and enjoy, and for nothing more of just the vampire in it.
Yeah, I definitely check it out. I always give horror movies a chance, even though they're really, really bad. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I just like to see it. Um, but what I watched this week were two basically like classics I go into, the vaults every once in a while. The first one you already mentioned is Demolition Man. I saw a clip on TikTok and that led me down the rabbit hole of wanting to see the film. I remember watching this film as a kid with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes, and it just was crazy. And it's where like it spawned so many pop culture references, from the Taco Bell being the last restaurant to be surviving of the food wars. And then you have, of course, Simon Phoenix, who inspired Dennis Rodman to dye his hair. And then, of course, we're both from Chicago, so Dennis Rodman playing for the Bulls, having, when his crazy hairstyles, just all around like crazy, cheesy, fun movie that I really liked. And of course, Dennis Leary's in it out of nowhere. Jesse Ventura plays a small role. It's just totally 90s nostalgia that I really enjoyed. I mean, it's not the greatest like action film, but it's very entertaining to me.
Oh, it's a great movie. And again, it's another one that I can see in our next 30 years of doing this show that we may break down all the scenes at one point, because again, it is just a really, 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 really awesome movie, and a movie that in my house, it was pretty much like, it was played all the time pretty much. I remember specifically like just listening to my dad laugh and think how cool those helmets were that they were wearing when they were getting it on, him and Sandra Bullock. And then, of course,
Oh, yeah.
mentioned the three shells, never knowing really what were those three shells, and these kind of conversations. But again, Wesley Snipes and Stallone, top of their game. And as you said, Dennis Leary, great movie.
Yeah, if I ever meet Stallone, I want to ask him like, what were the three shells for?
I think everybody, that is a question that is definitely one to ask.
And then the second movie I watched, Missing Football. The Super Bowl just happened, so I went to another old time, classic that I like to watch. Probably more of a movie that doesn't get mentioned more when we talk about football, and that's The Replacements. It's based kind of off a true story of the Washington team with Joe Gibbs. But all-star cast of Keanu Reeves, Gene Hackman. You have Orlando Jones in there. Just a great cast of characters. Jon Favreau plays a cop in there that a SWAT member that becomes a linebacker. It's a hilarious football movie that's really, really enjoyable.
Another great movie. Again, another one that came to me a little bit later, about 8-9 years after it came out. But again, I'm a big Gene Hackman stan. You're going to find anything that Gene Hackman is, and I enjoy it. I've went through IMDb and found movies that I never even heard of, and I love Gene Hackman. So again, great movie. Rise Offense, is that how you pronounce it? Does a good job in the movie too. But again, excellent pick. Football, again, a lot better than a lot of football movies that I've seen.
Yeah, an awesome soundtrack too.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
I love Brian's comment. Best part of The Replacements is when the cheerleader is driving him home and she drives like a fucking maniac.
Yeah.
You- It kind of reminded me of the 40-Year-Old Virgin when he goes with the girl when he goes with I forget her name. I can't think of her name on top of my head, but he goes she drives him and she's singing what song is she singing? She's some song she's singing, like she's just dancing the whole way.
Well, he's like that. What did she say? That asshole came out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and she's like, that's hilarious.
I need you to blow in this so you can drive.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, The Replacement's a great movie. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. It's entertaining the whole time. Great music. Jon Favreau and Nigel Gruff, guy who plays Nigel Gruff, is probably like my favorite characters in that film.
Oh, yeah.
And it actually got Keanu Reeves a tryout with the Baltimore Ravens at the time, which I think is hilarious.
That is really awesome.
Yeah. But that's what we've been watching this week. Let us know what you've been watching at the Show Pod or at our Twitter handles, Low Yumper and the Sugar Baggy. But we're going to transition into our segment with one of our fellow Penguins and Ass crew members, Roxy. We're going to get to Never Seen It.
Popular movies of all time, sir. What were you thinking? What the hell was that?
Miss Roxy, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you guys? And before I ask that, Tony, my condolences. Never,
It's okay.
don't need to hear the downplay of the animals. My friend had frogs.
Well,
and
okay. Well,
when the
thank you.
frogs
I appreciate
passed,
that.
amphibians, reptiles, they all make a difference. And so, especially 17 years, that's like what most people don't even get that with, dogs and stuff. And so if they can, they say the dog made that much of a impression on them even in 8 years. So I can't imagine 17.
Well, I
That's
mean, they
crazy.
started as little quarters, and now they're like, like that. So and like I said, we moved to California, and they sloshed around in the back of a tank, in the back of a car. We stopped in Las Vegas. They made it through the desert. They're rock and roll turtles, and we're gonna honor them with. And honestly, we're gonna honor them with this one of my favorite movies right here. This is a great pick.
Yeah, so Rox, we talked about this when you did the Silence of the Lambs, episode. You talked about you never seen Silence of the Lambs, and then we recommended Seven. I know it's been a little bit since you've been on, but this is one of my favorite movies as well. It's a David Fincher film, and those who don't know who David Fincher is, he directed The Social Network, Alien 3, Gone Girl, and Zodiac. He also did a great Netflix series called Mindhunter, which unfortunately got canceled way too soon. This film stars Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Arlie Emery, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kevin Spacey as well. And it made $327 million on a $33 million budget. So it made big time money. I think it was the 9th top grossing film in 1995. So what are your initial thoughts of the film Seven?
I fucking love this movie. This was so good. So just to be transparent, I watched this movie yesterday. I wanted to make sure that I had as much knowledge about it as possible before the podcast, especially because I do struggle with paying attention for movies. Did not have any sort of issue with this movie paying attention. It just grabbed me like right from the beginning. And I think that you mentioned when you were talking about Dune, about how it's very like visually appealing in terms of I obviously have never seen it, but just in terms of like probably the color scheme and just the different scenes and stuff. In its own way, I felt like Seven did that too, with how they casted the light upon the characters in their unique sin deaths. But so like for example, obviously the kitchen scene with the I think that was the gluttony, just how it was like very dark and like it almost made his skin look purple. Like I'm sure his skin was purple in general, but like just the lighting making him look a certain way and everything, and just it really added to like the grotesqueness of his body and stuff like that. I thought that was like really well thought out.
Yeah, so the film is actually like based off the writer Andrew Kevin Walker. He moved from Pennsylvania to New York, and when he got to New York, it was like a total culture shock to him. He saw like the rise of crime where he lived and like drug use, and he basically wrote it into a screenplay. So he wanted to make this like it's kind of like a noir film, which is like those old like kind of detective stories set in the town that you don't know, but it's always raining, which I loved about it. I love the fact that it's so gloomy and it shows like that there's a lot of bad things happening. For me, like one of my favorite things about it is like the opening to Nine Inch Nails, and that was like great done, like greatly done. You know, they had and Fincher made sure that for that scene, that particular opening scene, he wanted to make everything look like the killer made everything there. So that's why he had like all those visuals, and I thought that was awesome how they did that. Also, that song, "Hurt," not "Hurt." What's the name of the song that plays, Tony?
At the very beginning
Yeah,
of the movie, it's not hold on a second.
I know the
It's
lyrics.
not one of their more it's not like a more famous song here. Hold on a second here, but go on, continue.
Yeah, but it's very, very, like, appealing and, like, visually appealing. I love the storyline. I think the chemistry between Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman was, like, exceptional, and this is also, like, one of the first times we see Brad Pitt besides 12 Monkeys in, like, more of a serious, like, gloomy role, which I really liked. So what'd you think about that, Roxy? Like, did you ever see Brad Pitt besides maybe if you've seen 12 Monkeys in, like, kind of a role like this?
No, I was talking to a CPG about it at dinner before this. I have seen very few movies with Brad Pitt in them. Obviously, that's the whole theme of this segment. But the only movie that comes to mind that I've seen Brad Pitt in is Mr. and Mrs. Smith because we went to see it in the movie theater. And see, it's funny you say that, Sam. I don't know if that's because of the movie concept. There was never any part of this movie that made me like uncomfortable. And I don't wanna be like, "Oh, well, I just, like, don't have a problem with stuff like that," but I like, there was so much visually to, like, look at and just so much going on that I never had time to, like, really, I think, overly analyze, like, unique like, the exact situation because there was just so much going on that I think like, it's definitely a movie that I'd wanna watch again to, like, take in some of the scenes. But to answer your question, I'm sorry I got off
That's
topic
okay.
there. I have only seen Brad Pitt in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and so I was telling CPG about how I really enjoyed that. A few things about Brad Pitt's role. One being he's not overly arrogant, he's not overly cocky. There's a nice balance of like know what I'm doing, but I'm here to learn, etc. But I also really enjoyed that they decided to not go the route of like, oh, I'm a new detective and this is like my first big case or something like that because then he was able to like contribute kind of from the start without being like, "Oops, I made a mistake and now I'm derailing the case." Like with the exception of trying to wanting to get into the house or the apartment before anything, but they had this like chemistry right from the beginning that I feel like was related to the fact that Brad Pitt was not like a new detective, and so I do. Oh no, I've also seen Ocean's 11, but like nothing comparable, I guess, in the same vein of topic. So I thought he did really well.
Yeah, I mean, Tone, like, to me, like, when I think of Brad Pitt, like, I think of, like, him as a really, really good actor. I mean, I know he gets, kinda cornered into the pretty boy, love interest of a lot of films, and he did kinda do that in the early films, like Legends of the Fall, Thelma and Louise. He was, like, the love heartthrob in those films. But, I think he's such, like, an exceptional actor that doesn't get enough credit for, his acting skills. I know he just recently won an Oscar, but he's done some good stuff, like California was a good movie he did, this film, 12 Monkeys is another great film he did, would you agree, Tom?
I would agree. It was Closer. It was like a remix of Closer at the beginning of the movie.
Thank you,
That
thank
you
you.
were talking about, and also at the very end of the movie, a really awesome David Bowie song that you don't hear very often because in the 90s he worked with like Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that.
Mm.
But last night I saw you watched it and you inspired me to watch it about the 300th time last night again, and I finished it up at dinner today. And honestly, it's again Brad Pitt. I think I'm here talking the whole time at the dinner table, and my wife's just nodding because I'm like have all these theories about the movie. I think the whole movie, I think for a while, a long time, I thought he was arrogant. I think he's like, he thinks he knows exactly what he's going to be doing. It's really Morgan Freeman, I think, is the glue that really like, because that whole car
I've never
ride
seen Fight Club
scene
now.
at the end, Brad Pitt does 95% of the talking. And
Mhm.
Morgan Freeman only says the one. And if you watch when you watch it a second time, because this is actually the first time I ever did this, I just focused in on Morgan Freeman. He's looking at Brad Pitt almost like he knows that we're leading down somewhere that we're not going to be able to come back from. And Brad Pitt, he is in that moment because he is the police officer and he thinks he has Spacey had, telling him, well, you could tell me pretty much anything right now and you're not going to get me. But that's how life is sometimes, is that you get into this cat and mouse game. And the movie is a top 10 favorite of mine. So I'm glad you liked it, because as soon as I heard you were going to be watching it, I knew that this was just for you.
Yes,
So-
I am very glad that you guys suggested this. I enjoyed it. Like literally from beginning to end, I was like, this is great.
So is there like a scene that you thought stuck out to you in the film?
Honestly, it's gonna sound cliche because it's like, oh, it's just the ending, but the ending was insane. Like, just so my favorite character from this movie was actually Kevin Spacey. I'm not sure if that's unique or if you guys agree, but like Kevin Spacey in this movie was just like the perfect mix of intelligent, awkward, like quirky, just this. He was playing a character that like super, like in my opinion, granted I haven't seen a lot of Kevin Spacey movies, but like that role, like he was just so good at it that like I think there's just something to it. It just fit really well into the dynamic of what he already does. So the ending, when I only got like spooked one time during the movie, and for some reason it was when that van was like absolutely flying down the street to bring, or the dirt road to like bring the box. For some reason I was getting like freaked out because obviously I didn't know what was happening. And I was like, this is like, this is suspenseful. Like I didn't think anything was gonna happen like while the three of them were in the car or anything like that. But for some reason that van like gunning it down that street, I was like freaked out. Like my heart was beating. I was like, what's gonna happen? But it is a movie that like I did have to have the subtitles on because the movie does, in my opinion, kind of they go kind of to being like the soft spoken guy in the Seinfeld episode to like big things happening. So I was reading the subtitles sometimes and like missed the scenes. So I would like to go back and like rewatch the movie again just to run through some of those scenes again. But the very last one was just so like well thought out, and the idea of like when Kevin Spacey's like, oh, there's gonna be like two bodies, and I was like, oh, there's balloons. I was like, oh, Kevin Spacey's the body. Like, oh my god.
Yeah,
just genuinely like a genius. Like I would have never thought of that.
He's great because like Morgan Freeman, when he does speak in the car, lastly before they get to it, Morgan Freeman says something about God. And then Spacey, instead of like being a jerk like he was to Brad Pitt, he goes, well, God does work in mysterious ways, and lurks out the side of the window. Yeah, great. And it's cool too, because if you were to see this movie in the movie theater, promotional, nobody knew Spacey was in the movie. So you would have sat in the theater and been surprised that Spacey was who the killer was, which doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, and Fincher actually made a comment on that. He said that told Spacey, this is not a film that's going to define your career. This is a film that everybody's going to remember you were in it.
And wow.
Boy, I could not agree more. I also thought it was interesting. It took talking to CPG about it today too to understand that like it didn't occur to me that he wasn't actually like murdering them. If I understood it correctly, he's not actually the one committing the murders. And if I am understanding it correctly, he's just basically like all but getting them there. And I wondered if part of that is because he knows that like murder in itself is a sin, and so he wouldn't be accepted into heaven should he have actually performed the killings. I don't know if that's like a thing, but that's just what my brain was thinking about earlier.
I mean, that's a good theory. But at the end, he says he falls to his own sin of envy, and then Brad Pitt fulfills with wrath.
I mean, with the way he explains it, like, and I was saying this at the dinner table, was he tried to explain it like he was Dexter, like these people aren't really. So you really only in a world this sick would you look at me and tell me that I should feel bad that I took these people out. So in his head, these people are bad, so he didn't kill just people, he killed bad people. But like in the end, like I said to Katie, he still killed people, which is a law, and he broke it, and that's where
Yeah, I love how he tells him, I know, he goes, I know secretly you're thanking me for the lawyer. So just like,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also had discussed that I was curious if he was in fact suicidal, but because he had just like such a grim outlook on the world, but also like, I'm not religious, so this might be incorrect, but I think suicide in itself is also a sin.
Mhm.
So I'm curious if that, although the envy kind of completes the circle, I'm wondering if that was like part of the thought process, is to like, if I don't commit suicide, then I will be accepted into heaven because somebody is taking my life versus me taking my own.
Yeah, that's actually so the way you're analyzing it is like something I haven't really heard before. That's actually really good. Like it's making me think a little bit more about it. I always thought that like because Morgan Freeman kind of tells him in the car, like and Brad Pitt tells him like, you're a t-shirt of the week. And he goes, what I've done will be studied for years and years and years. That's what he tells them. I think he wanted to have what he's doing as a way for people to change or to be celebrated for the way he took out like the sins, and to be remembered for that. And also as a martyr to show that I'm not perfect, which I mean he's obviously insane. But I think that was my interpretation of it. Like, what about you, Tone?
It's kind of a lot of all, it's a lot of it's a lot of all of that. It's also a little bit, I think, just the way Spacey is able to, when they get out to the desert or whatever, and he's in the car, he is 100% selling them that what he has done is, of course, it's okay. It's okay to him. At this point, Gwyneth is dead already. Okay. Morgan knows what Gwyneth has been going through. Brad does not know what was going through. And that's why if at any point Morgan could have tackled Brad and Kevin goes to jail, then Kevin goes insane right there. Kevin screams, Kevin's going nuts because this whole thing is set up for that to happen. So if it doesn't happen, Kevin goes crazy. So like, and that's why the last line in the movie, actually the one that made me think the most, that Morgan says, he goes, the world is a great place. It's worth fighting for. And he goes, I believe in the second part of that. Because the truth of the matter is that here's Brad Pitt, this guy who came to town. Morgan kind of told him at the beginning, man, maybe this isn't one for you. It's not for me. Let's let it go. And Brad Pitt's, no, I'm not going to let it go. And sometimes I've been involved in things that people said, let it go. And I didn't. And then I got myself down a rabbit hole that couldn't get yourself out of. So it's a little bit of everything. And that's why I love the movie. It's so deep and everyone's explanations are great.
Yeah, I think like to both your guys' points just about like what Kevin Spacey always being essentially like a step ahead. Part of where I thought also just in regards to the suicide stuff is because like technically, even though they had him in the sense of like they knew who he was, he still at the end of the day like willingly gave himself up. And part of me is thinking that that's because he knew that he was just going to rot in a cell otherwise, and so this was his way of like completing the cycle, but then getting in off, like it's a three-way thing, like he's completing the cycle, getting into heaven because again he's being killed versus committing suicide, and then he's getting himself out of this world that he is borderline convinced is never going to change. And
but
so
like when he walks into the courtroom, into the thing, and he says, what does he say? Lieutenant! And he screams. Mm-hmm. At that moment, if they throw him in a cell and they never go out to the desert, because that's what the lawyer says to them. He goes, my client is willing to give you everything if you take him out to the desert. If they say, we're not going out to the desert, what happens then, do you think, to Spacey in that moment?
Well, he threatens. Remember, he says he'll tell them where the other victims' bodies are, but only Somerset and Mills can go.
So he set them up to really be out in that desert no matter what. Where the reality is,
yeah, it's like part of
the
it's like
reality
part of
is
being the step ahead. He knew he was that they were gonna do it
because they
He,
were
like,
actually
he
he was
knew that they
smarter
were.
than they he was
Mhm.
smarter than they were, and that's what's crazy is that he was actually smarter than the people who were chasing him.
Yeah, it's a
Well,
complete
yeah, because the last two
psychopath.
were what? I'm sorry, Wrath and
Envy.
was it Wrath and Envy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the envy part, I think, is like they were kind of envying, in my opinion, him because they were like wanting to solve the crime, but like they knew that they like the envy was that he was always a step ahead, and they wanted to try to get ahead of it, and so they were trying to like outsmart him while simultaneously falling right into his little trap, so they're just playing a game of like cat and mouse in that regard. But yeah, once the box came and I finally saw, because I've seen this GIF, obviously, of like what's in the box for like what 10 years now. It feels like, because for context, and this is gonna age you guys, not me, but like this movie came out when I was 3 years old, and so like I'm 31 now, so it took me,
I imagine you like in a
however
little,
long.
like a little. You're like in the theater next to me at 14, and you're like in this little like walker, and we're just like chilling, watching.
Yeah. Oh, dude, my mom would have 100% let me see this. Like, my mom took me to see X-Men when I was like 7 years old because that's when it came out. So like, my mom wouldn't have cared. She would have been like, if you're processing this and you want to be quiet, then you can go. But just so seeing it now, obviously, versus like seeing it like earlier in my life, I think that there's just a lot of stuff that I would have missed if I would have seen it earlier. So I'm very glad to have seen it at this point. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead. I was very content with like, if I don't ever watch Silence of the Lambs again, I very much enjoyed it, but I'm content with not watching it. And I would genuinely watch this movie any single like instance of somebody being like, "Do you want to watch Seven?" I'd be like, "Fuck yeah, I want to watch Seven." So it was very good.
It's pretty amazing because it literally. I don't even want to jump to conclusions, but it's immediately I'm like, I wish I was in the room when you were watching this movie, because again, the movie oozes, like you said, it draws you in. You can't stop watching it. Silence of the Lambs is a great movie. Don't get me wrong. I've watched, but it doesn't play like this. It doesn't have that lasting effect for me. So I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Well, especially too, because, and sorry to speak over you, Yump, like Silence of the Lambs, as much as there was like suspense and stuff, like you kind of knew where it was going.
Mm-hmm.
You knew eventually that what was going to happen ultimately happened. But like with this, there was never a point where I was like, all right, this is, heading in a certain direction. I felt like there was enough suspense to be like, oh, okay, what's going to happen, versus just, oh, okay, they're going to arrest them and, find the bodies and stuff. So that was the big twist at the end, obviously, with what was in the box, was one of the greatest, I think, just like spins in terms of like, you think you're doing this and then they go like that, but it doesn't derail the movie. It just feeds right into the whole thing. So I thought that was really, really intelligent what is the director's name again?
David Fincher.
Something.
David Fincher.
David Fincher, and he directed Fight Club, right? Didn't he?
I believe so. He did. He
Yes,
also
he did.
directed.
Okay.
He did another crime movie called Zodiac, which is really good too.
Oh yeah, that's the one with like Jake Gyllenhaal, maybe Jake Gyllenhaal.
His follow up to this movie, I
Robert
like a
Downey
lot.
Jr.
Called. You ever see The Game, Yump?
Yes, with Michael Douglas. Very good movie.
Really good movie. You'd love. It's another movie that's a mind where you're like, I love movies like that. These are my favorite type.
Well, because Mindhunter, also great show. I did watch that on Netflix. I was like, this is a fucking fantastic show. And so the psychological stuff is definitely up my alley. So, when you told me about when I decided to watch Silence of the Lambs and then you suggested this, I was like, all right, I can see the trend we're getting on, and I'm very glad we're doing it.
Yep, he did start off as a music video director, and then he his big first role was to direct was Alien 3, and I thought Alien 3 was not the greatest Alien, but it was good.
My dad took me to go see it at 11. It was really cool.
Oh yeah, I'm more of a Predator girl, but still.
I love Predator. Oh yeah,
Predator.
Great too.
MVP though.
So just a couple like little trivia things about the film. It's kind. I like I said, we both all of us said that we loved the cast. Denzel Washington actually turned down the part of Mills. He thought the script was too dark and evil at the time, and he says today he totally regrets, uh, turning that down after seeing the film. Uh, all the books in John Doe's room, when they go to his room, all those notebooks were actually written by the writers, and it took $15,000 to do so and 2 months to get that written out. So I thought
Wow.
that was pretty crazy. Uh,
Hmm.
and, just some more casting news. The roles of Mills and Somerset were actually, when Denzel Washington was attached to the film, was going to be Al Pacino
Oh, jeez.
Oh God,
as,
I don't know about that.
Somerset and Denzel
Booyah.
Washington as Wills. I can't see them playing it. I know Al's, like, comes up in a lot of roles in the '90s and some. I think, Morgan Freeman's demeanor was probably the better for the film. You know,
Mhm.
um,
I agree.
Sylvester Stallone actually turned down the role of Mills, and I can't see Stallone playing it or even Robert Duvall playing Somersault.
Ugh.
Um, I thought it was crazy that Guillermo del Toro actually came out later and said that he was offered the chance to direct this film, and he turned it down because said he's a romantic. He doesn't like to subscribe to the script's dark view of the world. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty dark, but it would have been crazy if he would have directed. And then one last little trivia nugget here. Val Kilmer actually turned down the role of John Doe.
Really?
Mhm.
Hmm.
That would have been cool.
I think that guy who was in oh God, who was the dude who played the bad guy in Indiana Jones, the one we all went to?
Oh,
Um,
Mads Mikkelsen?
I
Yeah.
think he would have been a
He would've
good
been
John
good.
Doe
I
also.
could see it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, he does
He's
play
got
Hannibal.
he's just got this like mystery to him that I think is
Great
would have been good
actor.
for this role. Mhm.
Um,
I'm a fan.
so Rox, you already said this film was better than Science for Lambs. Did this film make you wanna, like, kinda explore similar type of psychological thrillers like this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to go like Parasite level psychological fucked up shit because I did watch that. That movie. I had to like take a lot of breaks. That was the first movie I've ever watched where I had to like legitimately pause it and like go outside and like get some sun and pet my dog. But yeah, that kind of stuff where there's like twists and turns and it's not predictable. I love that kind of stuff. So this was a good start if that's kind of the gist of or the trend you're going with.
Cool. So if you wanna stick with psychological films, Zodiac, we can recommend to watch. Identity is another great.
Identity is a good one.
It's not as, deep as this one, but it's a good film with John Cusack and Ray Liotta, uh, about these people who go to a motel and people just start dying off. It's a really good. It's not scary, it's more psychological film if you wanna check that one out.
Mhm.
And then people are pushing for you to watch Fight Club.
That's understandable.
That's
I
another
am
psychological film.
I'm good with any of that. I mean, like a good psychological film that I also watched in kind of the same, more so because Zodiac, Jake Gyllenhaal was in that. I like Prisoners with
Mm.
Oh, it's a
because
great movie.
Yeah.
obviously if Hugh Jackman's in it, I'm going to watch it.
Did you
Um,
watch that, you
I
said?
did, yeah.
Did you like that one?
I did. I
That's a
saw it
great
in
movie.
theaters, so it's been a
Oh,
while.
awesome.
But yeah, if Hugh Jackman's in it, my butt's in a seat in the theater. I don't care how
That's
much
the
the ticket
same
costs.
director as the Dune director. It's the same
Oh, no
director.
shit. That's
Pretty
awesome.
cool.
And honestly too, like even though it's not intended to be in like this more like like suspense kind of thing, The Prestige I think also has that
Oh,
same kind
that's a
It's a
of
good one.
great film.
very good film. Like I think him and Christian Bale do a fantastic job. And I also think David Bowie did really well in that as well.
Very good.
But yeah, any of those, I'm down to watch Fight Club. I mean, maybe what if this is just shooting from the hip here. I know Fight Club might win, but maybe we can do a Twitter poll and let Twitter
Sounds
decide.
good. Sounds good to
Okay.
me.
Cool. Yeah, we can put that out.
So,
We'll put it out after the show today.
but maybe we'll throw in like a mystery fourth one so that there's like a little bit of I'm totally just like making things up. It's your show, and I'm just
No,
like,
no, no,
hey,
no.
let's do this. But because most people are going to vote for Fight Club, in my opinion, but I would like there to be maybe like one other movie that would make Fight Club a little harder to pick from.
Oh, I can come up with
Um,
one of those.
Yeah, but I'm down to obviously like whatever, but I think
Don't put
maybe
words.
some of that let the fans watching the show, the subscribers, pick something and go
Sounds
from
good.
there, if that works for you guys at
No,
least.
I like it.
Yeah, don't put Whiplash over. Sam, you just gotta watch Whiplash, man. I know. I think you want to watch it. That's why you keep pulling on your
I've
pulls.
told you to watch it the last 4 times, and you haven't picked it one time, and it hurts my feelings.
You just gotta watch it, man.
Whiplash.
It's with what's his
Miles
name?
Teller,
Miles Teller and
J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons, who looks like my father-in-law. Like they look.
Really? I gotta
Yeah.
meet him. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
That's funny. I mean,
Um,
I'll watch Whiplash if that's
Whiplash,
you know.
you'd like a music fan, you love it.
yeah,
great
it's
movie.
a good film.
It's really intense too.
Yeah, J.K.
Cool.
Simmons won an Oscar for the film.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Rox,
But yeah.
thank you so much for coming on. And it's not just our
for having
show.
me.
It's not just me and Tony's show. It's our show when you get so you add a lot to it, and we love doing this segment with you, and we love hearing your experiences on these films that you've never seen before.
Yeah, this has been great. It was funny. I was like, at the first thought of doing this, I was like, yeah, I'm just throwing this out there for content, but I'm genuinely enjoying this because it's like opening things up and like the dialogue that we had, and like even just when you were mentioning like that, I brought an idea that you hadn't considered before. That just means a lot because it's like just being comfortable, being able to share the idea, and it's like it sparks a conversation. I feel like that I can always get that with you guys, so I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you too. Thank you so much for coming on.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Have a great weekend, guys. See you
You
later.
two have fun at the show.
Yeah,
See
have
you.
fun. Deuces.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we will be putting out a poll. Tony, you are the poll master, so you're gonna put that out for us
We will.
to get for Roxy to do her next review on. Like I really like the segment because I love Jack's segment as well because Jack always brings something new. But when Rox like her first experience of it, it really brightens my day because it reminds me of when I first saw the film. Like
me too.
Like love or hate, I just like to see her reaction to it. So
yeah, I mean that's my favorite thing about watching movies. My wife has like a 7-year span, so we've been dating 13 years. I show her movies, she's like, "This is great." I go, "I showed it to you 10 years ago." She's like, "Really?" So like I love showing people movies and getting that first reaction to them. So it's awesome.
That's funny because my wife, I'm like, "Hey, have you ever seen this movie?" She's like, "I think I watched it with you." That's her response all the time because I watch so many movies and I'm like, I don't think you've seen it with me. This movie came out like recently.
Well, the thing is she says she's watched it me, and I start becoming Mr. Quizman. Like, who was the actress? And she's like, I don't know. I go, you didn't watch it then. We got to watch it again. And then
if I tell my wife who was somebody, like she would not know any actresses, or she's really bad with names.
Katie's like that line in the movie Blow, where he's like, I went in with a bachelor's in this, and I came out in a master's in cocaine. Because like she came into this relationship not knowing many movies. I just overheard her say she watched Brooklyn's Finest, this not very good movie. And I'm like, if she watched that bad movie, I can get her to watch all these great movies. And then we started dating.
Yeah, wait, you guys watch a lot of movies, I know. Ooh,
no,
crazy.
I never, no, never.
Yeah, so be sure to check out Roxy at the All Sports Scene as well. She writes some great content over there, and they do the Asscast every Thursday, as well as What's Up Your Ass on Tuesdays, which is probably one of my favorite shows to watch because it's totally like off the cuff. They just did a great episode with Josh Nelson on Society, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, be sure to support her there as well as Statistic Penguin Studio. She does some articles for us as well. She's one of our writers, and she's awesome. But Tone, we are going to get into our main event of the evening. So a film that both of us love. Would you like to expand upon it?
Yes, tonight we are going to be digging into the great My Cousin Vinny. The reason we're going into My Cousin Vinny is because with the Oscars coming up in a few weeks, we've decided that, well, we're here to celebrate it. And tonight we are doing so with Marissa Tomei, who won for this movie.
And the Oscar goes to Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny.
There you go.
Yes, and there will be some more information about that in the show. So that's awesome. I love that you brought that up because we didn't talk about what Tone. See, Tone's been taking over the clips and audio while I get my computer fixed, and he's doing an excellent job. So it's kind of fun in seeing him put in the little clips and sound bites now that I usually do to go along with his awesome presentation. So that's awesome. But yeah, this is one of the movies that I remember watching randomly with my dad and my brother, and the first thing that popped into my head was I saw Ralph Macchio and like the Karate Kid, and he was in the movie where he was not playing the Karate Kid, so I was like, oh man, so it really got me into law and like just get my passion for just learning about the law. When I was a big huge Law and Order nerd with Jerry Orbach. I love the original show, and then you had Benjamin Bratt in that show. I love that show. The original one was always my favorite one to watch.
Last
And
night was the Sam Waterston's last episode on Law and Order, and I tuned
oh,
in. It was actually this new season. It's my mindless Thursday TV that I'll put on just in the background, and I've always been a big fan too, so I get that.
yeah, Sam Waterston, another good, great actor, television actor. Doesn't get enough credit for his acting ability.
Oh.
But yeah, so My Cousin Vinny was like one of the great films that I like to watch. When was the first time you saw this film, Tom?
I saw this film probably around 14, 15 years old. It was a couple of years after it came out. But again, Marissa Tomei, I at this point have seen. Someone earlier brought up on the Twitter a movie called Untamed Heart with her and Christian Slater. A good performance. I'm a really big fan of this movie called Four Rooms with Tarantino's involved.
Yes,
Robert
very good film.
Rodriguez. She's in that. She's in a lot of stuff that I enjoy, and I wanted to tune into this because Joe Pesci's someone else I love, and I grew up in a Munsters house. So Fred Gwynn, you could sign me up for anything that he's in, and it was great. It's a great movie. Often heard a lot of lawyers. I've heard actual lawyers say that this is actually one of the closest movies in relation to an actual like a lawyer movie, as opposed to like The Firm or something like that with Tom Cruise. So it's kind of cool to hear from a lawyer.
Yeah, Few Good Men's another great film. Sam put out he has not seen this film yet, so he doesn't want no spoilers. So Sam, we're gonna go into the development of the film. Basically, we're gonna go into talking about how the film was made. You might want to skip the film breakdown and come back and watch that because we go through a real deep analysis of every scene.
Oh, hold on. Before we go on here, Brian mentioned Untamed Heart is such nonsense. He is not wrong. We would make these jokes because Christian Slater gets a baboon heart in this movie.
Yes,
and we would me and my friends would make these. I don't want to say they were jokes because now maybe they were kind of as a kid and maybe insensitive, but thinking a baboon heart could I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Save his life. Well, I mean, he kind of has like a child's mentality with it because he tells a story about the baboon king and then the gold, and it was like that part. I remember watching that film. Like, I actually liked that film.
Yeah, it's not a bad movie. I actually rewatched it.
Yeah,
recently.
that film in there, the part where he does that, like I remember watching him. Like, where the hell's he going with it? It was so random.
It was.
But yeah, the dickhead from Son-in-Law as a prosecution is phenomenal. Oh yeah, we'll have more story about that. But Tone, let's get into our development of the film.
Do it.
In my thoughts, I use the technique of positive visualization.
So the film was actually written by Dale Launer. And he came up with the idea for the script, and he was talking to a man waiting for his bar exam results. He was a student in college, and he happened to walk into a room and saw a guy waiting for his bar exam results. He told ABA Journal in 2012, in the very early 70s, I met a guy who had taken the bar and was waiting for the exam results. He asked the man, what would happen if he didn't pass? And the guy basically responded, he would take it again and again until he eventually passed. So he asked him, what's the most time somebody has taken and failed and finally passed? And Lana remembers the guy saying 13 times. And he says, I'd always thought that a guy who took the bar 13 times, or girl who took it, is probably out there practicing law in some capacity. Now, would you feel if suddenly you learned that the guy is your lawyer or woman is your lawyer? What if you've been accused of a crime and clearly you have what appears to be the worst lawyer in the country? And that kind of spawned his thinking of creating a film based around it, a screenplay based around it. Now, Launer did have some success doing Dirty Rotten Scoundrels previously, and this was just something that was his pet project on the side that he thought of earlier and decided to develop more. To research the script, he decided to take a road trip through the South. He started off in New Orleans and then went through Mississippi and Alabama. This trip added a lot of material to the film. His car got stuck in the mud. Grits was on every single meal that he ate down there in the South. Even owls screeching at night that were, some experiences that he was having. He even went to the district attorney of Butler, Alabama, Doug Null, and wanted to learn everything about the law. He learned you didn't learn criminal court procedure from law school at the time, as it is taught to you by the firm that you're hired on by, or you learn by going to court yourself. Now, shout out to Celeste Spaghetti because she's our, show lawyer, and I wanted to see, is this still taught this way? Where you learn procedure outside of the actual law program. And she told me that today some schools require you to take criminal procedure, while some others require criminal law. She goes, but most of the lawyers she's spoken to have taken criminal procedure as an elective. So that's more of the thing that's going now that it's offered. While I thought it was kind of crazy that at the time he said that criminal procedure wasn't offered by the schools and you had to learn on your own or by the firm. That's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, that's really crazy. Really, really crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, so that's just strange. This inspired, of course, the Vinny character not knowing criminal court proceedings, and as we learned later in the film. Lauder wanted to learn as much about the law as he could. That's why he was doing this trip. That's why he was meeting with Doug Null of the attorney of Butler, Alabama. He wanted to learn so much that he could just weave it into his script. He also was a huge fan of Sam Kinison, which I thought was funny when I did research for this. And Sam Kinison, if you guys don't know, is a comedian that used to be known for screaming into his mic and his jokes. His probably most predominant role is probably in Back to School as the history teacher, Professor Turgerson. That scene where he just goes off on the girl for Vietnam, her answer to Vietnam makes me laugh. Also, another comedian that died too soon by a car accident. But he was also known for going back and forth with hecklers, and he wanted to write this aspect into the main character of Vinny. The Mona Lisa character, played by Marissa Tomei, and her relationship with Vinny was inspired by two friends who were in a relationship. And they always had fiery exchanges that Lauder kind of just picked up on and incorporated to his script. So it's inspired a lot by his experiences that he had going through, life, which I thought was pretty funny. After finishing his research trip, it took him about 6 weeks to write the screenplay. Since Lauder again had wrote 30 Rotten Scoundrels, and that was a hit at the time, this was destined to get picked up. 20th Century Fox picked this up, Tone. And upon having a meeting with President Roger Burbam and Vice President Riley Ellis, Lauder spoke of his experience to Rolling Stone. He says, I remember my first creative meeting with Roger Bilbam, who was a president of Fox, and Riley Ellis, who was a senior vice president. I remember word for word how Roger started the meeting. Good work. Very funny. Good work. Do you think you could cut out the character of Lisa out of the movie? She has so many great lines. It'd be great to give those to Vinny, since it makes her look smart. I laughed and said something to the effect of, that's a little like saying, I like the script of Easy Rider. You think we could cut out the lawyer? Roger, you just pointed out the best thing in the script. What do you think about that, Tom, that they wanted to cut out Mona Lisa?
Again, I hear a lot more, probably, honestly, I could be wrong, but it seems like a lot more probably this is going on now than it did. Luckily people got the fight back then, and luckily the character stayed. But if she's not in this movie, I mean, it's obviously it's like 50% is good, because she's not in it.
Yeah, and that's like, just think about now. She was such a pivotal, crucial role, her part she plays in the film, and like the balance of her and Pesci, and it's just crazy that they really wanted her out. So Lauder, of course, fought back against this, and they were like, okay, I think they basically were like, okay, we're gonna pick up the script, and we're gonna find ourselves as director. So the rumored director to have started this was Danny DeVito. He was supposed to star and direct. He was going to play Vinny. DeVito wasn't a huge fan of the script. Lauder remembers meeting him for a 1-to-1, and he said that DeVito was like, this script doesn't have a lot of go in it, meaning that he wants a lot more action, a lot more fluidness. And he's like, a lot of go. He's like, yeah, it needs a lot of go. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, right then and there, he knew that DeVito's heart wasn't into it. And Danny, respectively, dropped out. He's like, maybe it's not for me. So Fox went and hired a British director named Jonathan Lynn to direct this movie. Now, a little bit back history of Jonathan Lynn is he actually has a law degree and was really crucial to assisting the film's legal proceedings were realistic. So he was really big predominant on having everything look as it would in real court, the proceedings to be done like real life, which I think is really, really a great key to how the film flows and like the authenticity of the film. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree. I mean, now when you say it like that, that's exactly why it flows the way it does.
So when they hired Lin, here comes the studio. They again asked him to write a revised screenplay. Uh, this was due to Lawner, they said, because he was working on another film called Love Potion #9 at the time, and the fact that the original script was 3 hours long.
Whoa.
So the studio had cuts they wanted to do to the script. Parts that were cut was Vinny saying he was dyslexic, which I think completely turns around the whole story as you understand why he probably failed the bar so many times. Uh, and it's another reason why he doesn't want Lisa's help in the film because basically he doesn't want to be perceived as stupid. He wants to be perceived as he's smart, which I thought that was a crucial part. I thought they should have kept in.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, when you're, the first part, like you said, being dyslexic, that could made it different, but the other part, definitely.
Yeah. And then another part was Vinny was supposed to be a heavyweight boxer. That was cut. So the persona of Vinny was totally different. The mud in the face and the board scene with the car, that was added by Lin, and Lawler didn't like it. He thought it was slapstick, and he didn't think it was just like for gags. Another thing cut was Bill's mom. And this as we go into the deeper Bill breakdown, we wonder why Bill's mom's not there. He calls her, but she never comes. And there was actually scenes that were supposed to be filmed about her having a heart attack that, were about to be filmed, and then they decided to be cut because they said that the film was already too long as it is. Back then, this is when movies were not 3 hours long. They were usually 90 minutes to, 90 to maybe an hour 45. And, they didn't want to make it any longer. So they wanted to cut down as much as they could. Of course, these changes did not sit well with Lawner and Lin, and they argued and it caused a lot of tension between the two, which they have made up. But at the time, it caused a lot of back and forth with them, which to me is that the studio's already starting off on the wrong foot, having the director kind of do the bidding for them over the writer.
I agree.
But we get into casting. So Vinny, we already said, was considered by Danny DeVito to direct and also to star as Vinny when that didn't work out. But when Vinny was portrayed as a former boxer in the film, they were looking for somebody big. And Andrew Dice Clay was considered. The Dice Man was huge at the time. If you don't remember him, he was really big. The man sold out stadiums all over the country. His comedy, it's still pretty funny to this day. Still raunchy, but funny.
Adventures of Ford Fairlane, his movie he released.
Also, Brain Smasher, a love story.
Yeah, that was definitely.
Yeah. Also at the time, the studio vice president Riley Ellis was dating his manager at the time, and she met the Dice Man, and during the interaction, he said something horrible to her.
Oh well,
and she went to Lawner and Schiff, the casting director, and said, "Yeah, can you guys kind of take him out of consideration?" So the Dice Man, his chance to be Vinny was thrown out right there because God knows what happened. But yeah, he was kind of cut loose there. So Peter Falk was actually considered for the role. John Lovitz was considered for the role. Another, I know that you love this guy. Jim Belushi was considered for the role, and Robert De Niro were all considered for the role of Vinny. De Niro was really wanted by Lawner because he wanted an Italian American to play Vincent Gambini. The funny thing is, Belushi was very close to making it happen. He was almost cast, but he decided to pass in the film due to being connected to the original League of Their Own film that was supposed to be filming. And then, as we know, Tom Hanks actually took over that role. Later, Belushi said that he regretted passing on it, and I'm very happy he did.
Yeah, I mean, it goes from being what we know it to be, from being like his follow-up to K9, something really not remembrance by. So yeah, definitely glad that happened.
Yes, and when De Niro was being talked about, the studio president again, peeked his head in and said, "Oh, why would you want De Niro? He's not a comedic actor." And it kind of seemed like a pipe dream for Lawner. So when they were balking at him doing the role, Launer and Schiff, the casting director, decided, let's start turning our attention to maybe Joe Pesci. Pesci had just come off Goodfellas. Well, he was actually still filming Goodfellas, but he just came off Lethal Weapon 2. You could do comedy. Casting director David Rubin loved the fact that Pesci could play a tough guy due to his roles in Raging Bull, Goodfellas, and Once Upon a Time in America. And he also loved that he did comedy movies like Home Alone and the Lethal Weapon series.
Easy Money?
Yeah, Easy Money. Pesci used his inspiration for Vinny for Friends of the Neighborhood, from Friends of the Neighborhood. So a lot of the stuff he got as Vinny, the portrayal, is from his friends in the neighborhood, which I thought was pretty cool. So we have our Vinny. Vinny is set. For Bill, this made me laugh doing research. Ben Stiller auditioned for the role.
Oh, Lord.
Ralph Macchio's agent sent videos in for the role as for him auditioning, and Lynn loved it. Jonathan Lynn was a big fan. He wanted to work with Ralph, but the studio thought Ralph was kind of old news. They said, that's the Karate Kid. We're in the 90s. He shouldn't be doing this, which I thought was pretty funny because he's having a resurgence as the Karate Kid Cobra Kai, which I think is hilarious. And eventually, it worked out to where he was cast. Stan, his friend, Will Smith actually auditioned, but Mitchell Whitfield had a great audition as well. So it was between them two. Mitchell Whitfield will go on to say this is the only role he beat out Will Smith for, and probably the only role he ever will beat out Will Smith for. Eventually, they decided to go with Whitfield, and I thought this was very interesting because the original thought was, even though Stiller didn't have a great audition, they were still considering pairing him and Will Smith as the roles of Stan and Bill. The casting director thought, casting an African American as an unjustly arrested man in a deep South would kind of change the tone of the film. Hence the reason Smith and Stiller weren't cast, because he's like, you have a Jewish man and an African American man. We're trying to make a comedy. We don't want it to make serious, because that's kind of like a serious tone. So they kind of pulled back on that, which I understand why. They also said, they didn't want to put too much pressure on Will Smith. He was a great actor, but they didn't want to put too much pressure on him to have to carry the load of trying to make his film as a comedic film instead of a more serious film, which I thought was pretty crazy. For the role of Jim Trotter, Mr. Trotter, Lane Smith was automatically cast because he resembled the DA Doug Knoll that Launer has spoke to. And the funny thing is, when I was reading the interview Launer was talking about, he said when he was talking to Doug Knoll, he thought in his mind, man, this guy really, really reminds me of Lane Smith. If I make this movie, I'm casting Lane Smith. So he automatically was, in like sin, as they say. For the public defender of John Gibbons, who is probably one of my favorite parts in the film, they went with Austin Pendleton, who at first was really hesitant of taking on the role due to the fact that he had a real stutter in real life. And when he was reading the script and saw his character stuttered, he was kind of uncomfortable that he didn't want to be typecast. He wasn't an accomplished actor, but they took him out to dinner, and he said after the second bottle of wine, he's like, all right, I'll do it. Let's do it. And unfortunately for him, he was kind of typecast for a little bit, but he's still acting. He just did a play, Steppenwolf. He's 83 years old, just did a play last year for Steppenwolf, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, he's magnificent in his role. For Sheriff Farley, we went with the great Bruce McGill. Bruce McGill is actually a golfing partner and buddy of Joe Pesci. And when Joe Pesci was cast, he kind of had final say on the casting. He said that he went to go golfing with Pesci, and Pesci's like, by the way, I told him you got the part. I signed off on it. And he said he got on one knee and kissed Pesci's ring and said, "Thank you, Godfather." And Pesci's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like he said, so it was like a joke between them two, and he cracked up about it.
Bruce McGill should have got a supporting actor nod for Last Boy Scout.
Oh,
he's great though.
I mean, he blows up in the beginning though.
I know that's just their little back and forth. I mean, but to be fair, what movie was it? Gary Sinise got one for The Green Mile, and he just sits on the porch for like 10 minutes, and
those are kind of those throwaway,
I know.
No, but I like Bruce McGill.
Bruce McGill's amazing.
He's actually in the new Reacher series in the first season.
He sure is. Yes.
He does a great job in there as well.
We'll go over at a later date, but we should do something with you watching the Tales from the Crypt old series, because McGill's in one, Joe Pesci's in one, and great actors.
Oh,
Bruce
yeah.
McGill. We could do a whole episode on Bruce McGill. I love Bruce McGill.
We got a lot of stuff planned for to go into not just film but also series as well, which I'm really looking forward to. For the role of Judge Chamber Holler, Christopher Lloyd was considered for this role. Actor Fred Gwynn was actually very good friends with Joe Pesci, and he was cast for the role. Pesci gave his blessing to it. Although Pesci didn't really at first when he was cast and they started filming, he didn't like the way he portrayed it, because Fred Gwynn was actually portraying it as Eddie Munster, as Herman Munster from the Munsters. And Jonathan Lynn, the director, pulled him to the side and told him, Fred, we kind of want you to be more serious. And he's like, I thought you wanted Herman Munster. He's like, no, we want you to be serious for this, which I thought was pretty funny. Pesci actually, when he was filming with him and he was doing the Herman Munster, was like, this guy's too, he's not. He wanted Wilford Brimley, and Bruce McGill, who was good friends with Wilford Brimley, said, yeah, Wilford Brimley wouldn't have worked out because he would have been straight. Like you wouldn't have the comedy interaction and chemistry between two. He goes, he would have played it straight. He goes, and I don't know if Joe could have fed off that. He goes, the movie needed Fred Gwynn. And just to do like a little background on Fred Gwynn, on the set, he was known for telling stories to the craft services. So after they would finish filming, he would stand around and talk to the craft services and tell them stories about his past life, his past, films, all the roles he did, like just his stories, drinking and smoking, and like instead of going back to his trailer, and everybody loved him. This is of course, one of the final films of his career. He eventually passed. Unfortunately passed. Nobody knew he was sick. I love the story that Mitchell Whitfield tells about Fred Gwynn. He told the Rolling Stone the original Game Boy came out right around this time. And during lunch break at one point, I was playing Tetris and Fred walked by. You can imagine the look he gave me. He just raised one eyebrow in a way that was somehow both frightening and humorous. He walked past me, backtracked, and was like, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, it's a Game Boy. This is Tetris." And then I showed it to him and how it worked. The shapes drop and you move them. He goes, "Can I try it?" I gave it to him. He's so big that it looked like a piece of chewing gum in his hands. He was just this huge guy, and he's hunched over playing this game. He gave it back to me and said, "I'm gonna get one." The next day, he came in and was playing Tetris on his own Game Boy, smiling and nodding at me.
That's an amazing story.
Fred Gwynn is like one of my favorite. Like I watch anything with him, and I love the Munsters as a kid growing up. So I'm really happy. Yeah, Pet Sematary. Oh, dude, that's not a great film. He's awesome in that film too. But I'm really happy they kept him on. The role of Mona Lisa Vito, who as we learned, the studio wanted to cut, but was getting pushed past on. Lorraine Baracco was actually offered this role, and she passed on it. Lorraine Baracco's from Goodfellas. I'm kind of glad she did. I couldn't see her doing this role.
No.
Could you imagine? Can you imagine her
doing it? No. I'm just thinking of Goodfellas. Some of her scenes, like when she's crying.
Yeah, I like her, but it's just
no, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked.
Hip hop singer and actress Carol Davis was considered. She was good friends with Alana, and he told her about the script, and he told her, "Hey, I'm down in Butler, Alabama for some field research, and I'm looking for this role of Mona Lisa Vito, and I think you'd be good for it." And she's like, "You're down in Butler, Alabama?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm doing research for this film." And she gave the role the famous quote, "I bet the Chinese food is terrible." So even though she didn't get the role, he kept that in the film, which I love. No one was panning out for the part until Lynn was called by John Landis, who was asked him to come to the set of Sylvester Stallone's film Oscar. He was filming the film, directing the film, and they were tearing down sets, and he wanted Jonathan Lynn to come see, like, "Dude, look at these sets, they're awesome. Come check them out before they tear them down," which he did. When he arrived, he saw a girl playing a flapper girl doing her scene, which turned out to be Marissa Tomei, who was unknown at the time. Lin and the casting director thought she was perfect for the role, but knew there would be pushback due to Tomei not being known and the studio really pushing for a big star to take the role with Pesci. They remedied this though by having the studio screen test their 3 top choices and then had Tomei screen test as well. So they had 4 screen tests. They then brought the screen test to Pesci while he was filming Goodfellas. Pesci automatically thought, he's like, "Yeah, Marissa Tomei, she's the best one. I would love to work with her." And then when they presented it to the studio, of course, the studio picked somebody different. And after an hour and a half of fighting between themselves, they pulled the trump card and said, "You know what? Joe Pesci wants Tomei." And they're like, "Yeah, it's your film," because they're not going to fight against the star of the film.
Oh,
And basically the subject was, closed at that. That's pretty funny how they outsmarted the studio there.
that's great.
And like we said, there was some tension between Launer and Lin with the script writing. There's also tension with Lin and Pesci as a director, which I thought was pretty crazy. Bruce McGill recalls some tension between the two, telling Rolling Stone, "One day Joe stormed off the courtroom set. Any courtroom tragedy or comedy is tedious because they need to set up a lot of shots from a lot of different angles. You just get tired of it. Something happened and Jonathan laughed and Joe just turned and said, 'What? Do you think I'm here to entertain you?'" Which is totally like a Tommy DeVito's. he he said he threw a bit of a hissy fit. He said, "Find someone else to shoot. Find something else to shoot. I'm leaving," and he actually walked off the set. The crew left Pesci to calm down and moved on to something else. And McGill said, "I was getting ready to change out of my wardrobe at the end of the day, and I hear a knock at the door. It was Joe. He said, 'Bruce, come here.' Was that bad?" I said, "It's nobody's favorite thing, but you said to find something else to shoot, and we did. I don't think it's any big loss on the day, but nobody liked it since everyone is uncomfortable when somebody gets crabby. That's the only time I like that something happened." So Pesci was, and there's like also stories of Pesci and Lin, basically Pesci dressing him down about stuff. And Joe has been, his career, he's been a little tough to work with.
Oh yeah.
So I can see why he was having, some issues. But I mean, it's just kind of crazy that you would think this film was basically had like all shits and giggles, but it turns out it wasn't.
No, and that's what's cool when we get to go behind the scenes like this and look deeper because honestly, some of this stuff until doing research for it, you don't really know. You watch this movie 50, 60 times and you're like, "Oh, this is a great movie. I love it." But I love hearing stories because now when I watch it again or you out there watch it again, you can know a little bit on the backstory, which makes it even cooler.
Yeah, and I love Bruce McGill is actually a wealth of knowledge on this film. He actually says, precursing pretense to this story, he says Hollywood is not like this magical place everybody thinks it is. There's a lot of tension that are on sets, and that's why he explained what happened here. And that's true. I mean, there's tension at any workplace, but everybody thinks that Hollywood is so glamorous, and then we see things like the Christian Bale video, or they make parodies of the Michael Cera yelling at the director. Just like it does happen though. So, which I thought was pretty crazy, but that's our film development. We have our cast, we have our director. So what do you think about the stuff that we learned so far?
Like I said, we are digging deeper and we're really seeing the pieces coming together for this movie. I mean, again, you're mentioning earlier some of actors that could have been a part of this movie that honestly, and trust me, huge Wilford Brimley stan, love Cocoon, love The Thing, love him even in Family Guy for a couple times. They make again gives a different tone to the movie. I mean, Wilford Brimley, I've seen him he's in The Firm, I believe, and he's very serious. I mean, Wilford Brimley is not someone you're goofing around with on the set, and that's where Fred Gwynn could come off as somebody where, as you said, that touches story. That's one that's going to stick with me. So very awesome.
Yeah, they should. Brian says they should have starred Andrew Dice Clay and Cyndi Lauper. I mean, they could have, but I like the way the role came. I would have liked to see the Dice Man. It would have been kind of fun.
Well, let me put it to you this way: what did Pesci, because of this role, did you think it expanded him into more of a comedy role? No, I mean he didn't really do too much after. So, like, you put Dice Clay in here, does his career go bigger, or does this movie just become like one of those Andrew Dice Clay vehicles? You know,
It could have been. I mean, it depends on
You
who
know-
they cast as Mona Lisa.
yeah, that's true.
So I think it's a totally different film. He's in there. I don't think Frederick Wynn's in there. I
With
don't
Cyndi
think Jessica Biel's
Lauper,
in
you think
there.
Cyndi Lauper wins the she
Cyndi
get
Lauper?
nominated?
No, I love Cyndi Lauper, but I don't think she does. But that's our film development tone. Let's get into our film breakdown.
See the arc? He starts down here. He ends up here. Where's my arc, Paulie?
So the
two yutes. Two what?
I love that scene. The film opens with a drive down to Alabama. We see Ralph Macchio and Mitchell Whitfield driving as their characters of Bill and Stan, and they're driving down, listening to Way Down South, which, like, this is another film that comes out with them driving. With last film we reviewed, La Bamba, had the same thing. And I love these driving, like, it must have been something in the 80s and 90s, these driving, like, introduction scenes. I love how they're driving down, they're listening to music, and you just see, like, the landscape of the town and countryside. Yeah, and then Way Down South's a great song too. They then go into a grocery store called the Sack of Studs, and they buy groceries. One of the main culprits of the scene is that they are looking at prices of groceries, and they're looking at beans. And he's like, "Oh, I found a bean for 33 cents." And then, Bill's like, "This is 32." And Stan's like, 31. And one of my favorite exchanges, it's totally like off the line. He's like, "I never heard of that brand. Maybe the name brand here is worth the penny." He's like, "You're paying for advertisement, man." And you could totally tell they're just two college kids, going in. And me in college, ramen noodles were my best friend when we had money. So, to go out and eat lavishly. Ramen noodles were like the best. But I could totally relate to that, how they're trying to save money. During this whole scene, you see Bill wanting tuna, and he puts the tuna in his pocket, and they pay for their groceries and leave. And while they're driving away, Bill pulls out the tuna. It's like, "Oh, I didn't pay for this." And Stan's like, the rules on here for stealing?" He goes, "They'll give you a chair." And he's like, "Well, what's the what?" He's the chair. He's like, "Yeah. Do you know the death penalty age down here?" He's like, "What, like 16?" He's like, 10. And they start joking and laughing, but they are pulled over by a cop. And that, to me, like, when I was watching this film for the first time, I remember it was pretty intense how the cop pulls him over with the shotgun, and they're like, "Holy shit, for a can of tuna?" And we find out that, they go to the lineup, and that's what Stan says. "All this for a can of tuna?" Like, "Quiet in there." And we find out that the clerk, Jimmy Willis, was actually shot. So Tony, I want to ask you about the scene because it makes me laugh when Bruce McGill is looking at the body, and then they hear a call, "Oh, we might have a confession." And he walks out, and the lady comes up to him and says, "Oh my God, I heard they shot Jimmy Willis." And his comment, like, line is, "He's dead." She's like, "Oh my God." Like, does that whole interaction, what do you think about that?
It's again, it adds to the hilarity of the movie. Just you doing it actually right there made this whole show. I loved your impression. It was great because that's exactly what it was. And yeah, I think it's ridiculous is what I think it is. But good for the movie.
Yeah, it just shows like it was completely out of there. But we then cut to the questioning scene. And I love how they take different aspects of the crime. Bill and Stan believe they're there for stealing tuna, while Farley is there investigating a murder. And I love the line of questioning. I love how there's confusion. It's really, really well done. How they're like, "Well, why'd you stop him?" And Stan's like, "He's my friend." And when Bill comes in, Farley comes to talk to Bill. He's like, "Yeah, it was a stupid thing to do." And Farley laughs like, "Yeah, it was stupid to kill somebody." And he says, he goes, "But I want to let you know Stan didn't have anything to do with it." And Farley tells him, "Did he try to stop you?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "Did he plant with you?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "But he didn't try to stop you." And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh." And he writes something down, and he goes, "Oh, was that bad?" He goes, "Oh, aiding and abetting." He's like, "Aiding and abetting?" And he's like, "Yep, it's some serious stuff." Which And then he asks them when they're going through the confession, he's talking about how they came down from NYU, and he's like, "Okay, okay, okay." He goes, "You know, the can of tuna." He's like, "Yeah, the can of tuna." He's like, "Did you catch the tuna?" And he's like, "No, he didn't." He's like, "Well, what happened?" He's like, "We paid for our groceries and we left." And he's like, "At what point did you shoot the clerk?" He's like, "I shot the clerk," like repeating it back, and then he realizes, "Holy shit, they're getting me for
For
murder."
killing.
Yeah, uh, and it makes me laugh when they go and they put them in the bench, and they're sitting next to each other, and he's like, "Oh, they're messing with us." Stan tells him they're messing with us, and he says, "No, Stan, they're booking me for murder. They're booking you for accessory to murder." He's like, "God damn it." So that whole scene is great. So what do you think about it?
Oh, you brought to life right there. That was probably my best brought to life scene since we've done this show. That was good because I remember it's like kids over kids. Oh, wait a minute, this is not what we're talking about here. Again, great script writing, great dialogue. Again, Pesci hasn't even showed up yet, and we're getting really good stuff here.
Yeah, just a great scene, couple scenes going in, and then when he calls his mother, Ralph Macchio and Stan go to call. He's like, "Do we know any good lawyers?" Stan tells him. He's like, "No." He's like, "I'm calling my ma." We find out Stan's family's actually in Chile. They're doing mountain climbing, which is pretty funny. One of the best lines I think during this scene is when he's talking to his mom. He's like, "Hello, ma." He's like, "We're down here we're booked for murder," and he's like, "Listen, ma, we think we're being used as patsies." And Stan goes out to scream, "The Klan is here. They're inbred. They sleep with their sisters." And everybody looks at him. All the sheriffs look at him, and he goes, "Some of them do." And we get the famous line of, "Will any lawyer do?" And his mom says, he asked Stan, "Will any lawyer do?" And he says, "I think so." And he tells his mom, "I think so," on the phone, and she says, "Oh, your cousin's a lawyer." And he's like, "Who?" "He is." He goes, "We have a lawyer in the family." He's like, "Great. Who is it?" "My cousin Vinny." And we cut to the introduction of Vinny and Mona Lisa. And with the song that's playing, Tone, I don't even know the name of the song. It's just so like 90s.
Oh, it is. It's great.
And it's great. They're in like I think a Cadillac. He's driving down. They're all dressed in black. They pull over to the side, and there's something wrong with the car. Vinny gets out, and Mona Lisa is taking pictures with her yellow little camera, uh, then she utters the line, "I bet the Chinese food down here is terrible," which is great. And we learn of the mud in the tire scene. And again, this scene was actually inspired by somebody the writer had really met in Alabama, who said he had mud in the tires. This scene also shows the great chemistry between Tomei and Pesci. I love the fact that he says, "Hey, you stick out like a sore thumb here," and she's like, "Oh, and you don't?" And he's like, At least I got cowboy boots." And she's like, "Oh yeah, what are you, a fucking world traveler?" just that whole chemistry and like lines back and forth is what cracks me up. What do you think of this whole opening scene?
Again, it's great. Again, I like to see, and I wish there was more of Pesci in a lead role because I think he can hold a lead role like he does in this movie, and it fits him perfectly. And his introduction is exactly why I think it's perfect for him.
Yeah, it's a funny little like interaction with him and the townsfolk, and I thought it was really really done well. We then cut to the prison scene where Stan and Bill are actually taken to a real prison. Now, this was filmed in a real prison to await trial. We learned that the prison that the jail they're usually supposed to be housed in is actually condemned. So they brought them to a real prison. Now, in Bill and Stan's case of being accused of murder but awaiting trial, naturally they would have been sent to a county jail as they await trial. And however, since it mentions that the jail has been condemned, they had to wait their trial in state prison. In real life, this would be very unlikely to happen. And again, Jonathan Lynn was pushing for realism uh, for the film. But the reason he kept this in was that it added so much to the story that it added hilarity to the story, especially the later scene. Bill and Stan are put in a separate cell away from the prisoners, simply for the reason that they haven't been found guilty yet. And if they had been hurt or assaulted by the other prisoners, they would have waited before waiting trial. They both could have sued for being mistreated by temporarily incarcerated in a state prison. That means they were usually placed in a cell away from the inmates, and they showered away from them. They also had to avoid interacting with them, which is like there's another scene later in the film where they're playing basketball, and if you know, it's just them two on the court, and the guards are all watching them. So that's a reason why they were basically separated. But when they walk in and you hear all the cat calling when they're going to their cell, those are real prisoners. The guards are real guards. They're not actors. Everybody in that prison is real, which I thought was pretty crazy when doing research for this.
Oh, anytime you could get, some of the real whatever it is that you're filming, you can make it feel a little bit more real, and that's exactly what I think in the scene.
Yeah. So we then cut to them in their prison cell. Bill says he's going to take a nap, and we see Vinny being brought in. And he says, I tells them I wanted to, he tells Stan, I told him to take me to the new guys. Now, this whole interaction is pretty hilarious because he's like, tell me what happened. And like, he's kind of like trying to be his friend. Stan thinks that Vinny is just another prisoner who's trying to take advantage of him sexually, which I think is hilarious. And Joe Pesci utters a line like, it's either me or someone else. You're getting fucked either way. And the way Stan stands up is like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And he's like, I don't know what the hell is wrong with you. And he starts smacking Bill on the ass as he wakes him up, and Bill jumps up and he gives him a hug. Oh, Vinny, and he gave him a hug, which to me was like a hilarious little interaction. What'd you think of it?
That's again, it's funny to see, Ralph Macchio again in a role that isn't Karate Kid, and again, he's great. He's great in this movie too. I mean, I wouldn't like to imagine, even though I like, the actors who could have played him instead that you mentioned earlier. He does a great job, and I think mixing it up here at the beginning is letting the viewer know you're in for more great laughs.
Yeah. And like I said, the scene in which Vinny arrives to meet them in prison for the first time and Stan misunderstands him, the purpose for Vinny's visit was actually originally deleted from the script by Jonathan Lynn, the director, because he pointed out in real life, Vinny would never be allowed anywhere near a prison cell in the situation due to a possible liability, which is totally true. When he meets Stan and Bill, his introduction to them would have been taking place the whole time in a prison interview room, which is totally true, which was shown in the very next scene. However, Lynn eventually realized, despite not being authentic, he would be cutting one of the funniest scenes of the movie out, so he kept it back in. And I think that is totally true because that scene between him and Stan is hilarious. If you guys have not seen this film, watch the film for that scene alone because this film in total does a lot of like misinterpretation by the characters, and this is one of the scenes that is totally great. Just the verbiage, the back and forth between the two is classic and hilarious. I thought when Pesci tells him, I think you should be, thankful for me getting it. He's like, oh, I'm thankful because he thinks he's gonna get sexually assaulted. He's like, I should be thankful. Yeah, you little shit. That's just that part makes me laugh. But as we transition to them now in the interview room, we learn that Vinny has only been working personal injury cases, and he's only been practicing for 6 weeks. And I love the line that Bill gives him. It's like, Vin, you graduated law school like 6 years ago. What you been doing? Studying for the bar. And we find out that he failed the bar his first time, his second time, his third time, and he passed on his sixth time, which again plays into the man he heard about taking the bar 13 times, which I think is pretty hilarious. And you could see, I think Mitchell Whitfield does a great job as Stan when he tells him the sixth time, and you can kind of see like the excitement drain from his face. And I mean, like in a situation, like what would you do if your lawyer told you he's been only practicing for 6 weeks?
Well, again, it would depend on where I was. Like, if I'm down here in this situation where I took a tuna can and I got no one else and he's telling me that, I probably shouldn't complain. But again, finding out, you also don't feel very confident that you're going to win because if he didn't pass 6 times. But, you never know. Maybe he's like one of those baseball players that gets better as the years go on, and that's how his lawyering is going to be.
Yep. Then we transition to Vinny actually being the judge, and this is the first introduction of Fred Gwynn. They go in. Basically, the lawyer has to meet the judge to see if he's fit enough to defend the defendants. This scene is actually cracks me up as well because when he asks him, "Where'd you graduate?" He's like, "Brooklyn Academy of Law." He's like, "Is that an accredited institution?" And he looks up at his degree. He goes, "Oh," he's like, "Yeah." And then he says, "Tell me about your cases." Basically, he's like, "I defended the X murder, which I won on insanity." And he's like, "Do you want to hear the details of the case?" He's like, "No." And he's like, "The son of Sam?" He's like, "You defended the man who listened to a dog." He's like, "No, no, no, no. See, before another guy was caught, and I defended that guy before they caught the real guy," which made me laugh. And if you think about it, this is like in the 90s, so everything was done facts. So there wasn't like the internet was still like young. So there wasn't really like it was really hard to fact check on a lot of this stuff. But now you could just look it up online. But at that time, it was believable. Just the fact that the story he tells makes me laugh. That whole interaction between the two.
Good.
And the judge gives him a book of the Constitution of Alabama and basically tells Vinny, I expect you to become prepared knowing the full knowledge of Alabama law. Now, the funny thing is this book has more than 300,000 words, and the Alabama Constitution is the largest in all the states in the United States, which is ridiculous. So he wants him to learn it before the trial. And, I think this is where if they explained that Vinny was dyslexic would have played a lot better. It was cut out because he does have trouble reading, as we find out in the next scene when they're at the hotel. He tells Lisa, she's there. She's like, "How can I help?" And he says he wants to do it himself. He's reading the book. He's frustrated. He closes the book and they go to bed. And this starts the gags of the hotel stays that they stay at. They're sleeping and the loud steam whistle goes off. Tone, what do you think about this scene?
Hilarious. Again, you're sleeping and these if you're from where he's from and then you're down there, it's a total different walk of life. Not good or bad. It's just different than what you're used to.
Totally. Then we cut to the next scene where they go to a diner, and this kind of like hit me home a little bit for me now that I'm married to my wife and my father-in-law, who, when he was in the military, did his training in the South. And while they're there at the diner, they open up the menu and they see three things on the menu: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they're like, "Breakfast?" And while the cook is cooking, he asks him, "Did you this loud whistle?" And he's like, "Oh, it's to wake everybody up for the steel mill." And he's like, "Okay." They get their breakfast, which looks phenomenal. It's like bacon and eggs and grits. And this is where Vinny first sees grits, and it makes me laugh because my father-in-law hates grits, and he said when he was in the South, there were all the cooks would always see him come in to eat, and they're like, "Oh, you're that sour, you don't like the old grits." He always tells me that story, which makes me laugh. But this is the first time they see grits, and being from New York, both of them, they're like, "What is this?" And Vinny, she is told by Mona Lisa, "How about you try it?" And he tries to prolong it. Tone. He asks about like, "What's in a grit? How's it?" And she's like, "Just taste it." And while he tastes it, she takes a picture, which to me always made me laugh because it was just a funny interaction.
It was. That's a good interaction.
Mm-hmm. We then cut to the meat and potatoes, as we say, of the film, The Court Day. This is shot in the same courtroom as The Heat of a Night, where that was filmed, which I think is pretty crazy. Reading about this, the temperatures in that courtroom exceeded 100 degrees. And this film was shot in the summer during the courtroom scenes, which was in the midst of a Georgia summer and in a converted warehouse with a corroded metal roof. So they were probably dying. We'll get to that, Brian. We'll get to that. But at the courtroom, I love the first introduction. And Jim Trotter comes in, played by Lane Smith. He sees Vinny sitting on top of the desk in his black leather jacket, his little black shirt, and jeans. And he's like, "Has your lawyer arrived yet?" He's like, "I am the lawyer," which makes me laugh. And he's like, kind of ridicules him a little bit for his dress. Then we see the issues as we learn that that Vinny was never taught the procedure in court, and this will be his first trial, as he explained to Stan and Bill. Uh, he's asked to basically enter a plea. He doesn't understand the procedure. He tries to explain it to the judge that they're pulled over for a can of tuna. The judge basically yells at him and holds him in contempt. And I love the transition for this as they show him in contempt in court, and he's going to jail. He tells Mona Lisa, "You gotta bail me out." And while they're on their bus ride back to the jail, he's like singing and whistling Dixie, and like the two guys are just looking at him, and it makes me laugh that that scene, played out like he has no idea what's going on. Um, and we learn about the character, a small character named Norton, who's going to be executed at the prison. Uh, we then see them go to lunch after the bailout. There's Vinny and Mona Lisa, that is. And I love the way Vinny explains, you learn as you go. Think of it, he explains to her as like fixing a carburetor in a car. Like it's just like the way of thinking is very interesting to me. What do you think about this whole court day scene and the jail scene, Tone?
Well, again, we're getting Pesci. We're that whole the way he said he's stealing a can of tuna. You know what I mean? Again, it's your life's on the line, but I'm okay with Pesci in the driver's seat helping me, in the court if I'm one of these guys. But you're also like, well, who is this guy? And it's again, not like I don't want to. This is nothing like Seven. You're also, if you're seeing this for the first time, like, where is he going to take these guys? Like, is he going to get them off? It is kind of, if you're watching it for a first time, where is this going? Pretty much, I get at this point.
Yeah, and then we learn while they're eating lunch that Mona Lisa tells Vinny that she's almost used all their traveler checks. She went to go hustle at the pool hall and she got stiffed. And Vinny's like, "Wait, you got stiffed?" And they actually go to the pool hall to get her money, and we meet JT, who's played by Chris Ellis. And there's a funny interaction that he says, "You owe Lisa $200." And JT basically threatens Vinny, and they have a funny interaction between the two. He says, "How about I just kick your ass?" And he goes, "I could really use a good ass kicking, but nah, I'll just take the $200." And everybody laughs. And he goes, "How about you fight me for it?" And that whole scene they have is great. I really love the fact the guy with the neck braces in this film, the guy in the scene has a neck brace. Yes. And when he sees him, he's like rear-ended right away. The injury lawyer comes out and goes, "No, I fell." And like then he tells him, "You get the money and we'll fight for $200." And this is a whole little gag that goes out throughout the film. And as they walk out, he says, "Did you fall at your place or someone else's?" And he's like, "My place." And he just shakes his head and walks out. What'd you think about the pool hall scene?
Again, more introduction to the more dialogue, more whip smart dialogue between Pesci and who he's interacting with, which is pretty much, honestly, for any movie he's in, he's like even in Raging Bull, where he's, not main anything he's saying. I gotta believe a lot of his lines. Like I don't know for sure, but I mean, some of them can't be written word for word of him saying it. Some of them's got to be like right from the cuff, because that's how good he sounds when he's doing it,
Yeah. We then find out that, Stan is very uncertain with Vinny's presentation at court. He's pushing for a public defender, and he kind of convinces Bill to do so. And while this is going on, we have another sleeping night of the whistle going off in the morning, and him telling Mona Lisa, "We have to, we'll go somewhere else to stay." We then cut to the courtroom where they're actually interviewing for a grand jury the witnesses to see if the trial should proceed. We have the witnesses of Riley, Tipton, and Crane, and they testify that Stan and Bill were there at the scene of the crime in the preliminary hearing. One of my favorite lines is when Crane says, when he asks Crane, he's like, "Was that those two boys?" He's like, "Yeah, that was those two boys driving all over the road." Like that line always cracks me up. It still does today when I watched the film actually yesterday. So most states, all felonies must be presented to a grand jury to determine if there is probable cause to proceed with a trial. However, the process is rife with problems. Grand jurors were often selected because they were friends of the judge or the prosecutor, and evidence such as hearsay is allowed even though it would not be admissible at trial. No judge is present, and defendants are not present for the grand jury meetings, and defense attorneys are almost never allowed to attend. Thus, despite being a protection in the Constitution, the grand jury process usually favors the prosecution. For this reason, many states have moved to a more open proceeding as seen in the scene, which I thought was great. In some states, the defense may challenge the state's case by means of a defense packet, which they include a statement by the defendant and evidence in his favor. One respect in which this film departs from accurate legal procedure is sped by which the case proceeds to trial. In general, it's rarely, if ever, less than 180 days for this
Yeah.
stuff to happen. Uh, I love this film for that aspect of it. I know I'm giving you a bunch of legal mumble jumble, but this is why these scenes are shown, because it's showing that this actually does happen in the courtroom. And like we said, Jonathan Lynn wanted more authenticity to the court scenes. Uh, Vinny, again, after this scene, he is asked to stand up by the judge, and the judge says, "Didn't I tell you to wear a suit and tie to this courtroom?" And he responds, "You were serious about that?" Then we cut to them on the bus. Again, he's in contempt in court. And he says one of the best lines in the film. Stan is basically ridiculing him, saying, "Why did you argue? You could have had this case thrown out." And he responds, "Stan, you're in Alabama. You were from New York. You killed a good old boy. There is no way this ain't going to trial." And it's totally true. That whole interaction was great. What'd you think about this whole interviewing of witnesses and then the interaction on the bus?
Again, it's fun. It's not like Groundhog Day, but again, ending up back on the bus again. It's like the cartoon where like you get out and then you do it again, and then you're back in that same place to get back to. I think it's again, I mean, watching these characters, I for one school year went to Vincennes. It's about 3.5 hours down south of Indiana in the very bottom tip corner. While I was there, I met a gentleman from New Jersey. We became really good friends, and honestly, his dad grew up with Joe Pesci, which we'll talk about at a later time. But this being said, all we would do is make these jokes about the South and Southern Indiana. And I could see me and him getting in this situation. So it's funny to watch this movie and see it's not a fish. I mean, like one of the things when I was at Second City that you learn about story writing is it's an fish out of water story, because what makes it funny is they're in this Southern town and they're not living by the grits and the Southern drawls and stuff like that. I think, again, we're just keep building. The movie is getting better to the climax, I think.
Yeah, totally. I love that it's building up as we go. And then we transition from this to we still have the gags with the hotel rooms where he's woken up by the steam whistle. Now he's woken up by a freight train that goes by, and he goes down to ask the clerk at the hotel, "Does a freight train always come by at 5 o'clock in the morning?" "No, sir." Right? It's very rare, which I think is hilarious. And then we later find out it happens again, and he says, "You told me that the freight." He's like, "I know, it's very rare. It's supposed to come by at 4:15 in the morning," which makes me laugh. We see the interaction with JT and the roll of ones. "Hey, little Yankee boy." He shows him the roll of ones, to $20 bill. He's like, "I got you $200 here in a roll." He's like, "How I know it's not a bunch of ones with a 20 wrapped around it?" He's like, "It's 200. He's like, "Okay, fan it out to me." And he refuses to do it because he didn't knew if he got his ass kicked, he had to pay the money. Uh, those little interactions always made me laugh. These little side stories made me laugh. I love that when he gets out of jail, Lisa scolds him again. The chemistry between the two. "Are you fucking up this trial?" is what she asks him. And he's like, "No, I'm just learning." It's kind of crazy how Vinny is perceiving this. Like later we learn, he is nervous about this, but at first he's trying to play it off like, no, I got this. Even though two kids, lives are basically in his hands right now, trying to get them off. The whole interaction is pretty crazy. We learn again, Stan pushing for the public defender meets with the public defender, and we see him meet him, and he comes in and says, "No, I just want you to tell me about your side of the story." And you at first you think the public defender is great. Um, Bill decides to meet with Vinny, and Vinny is like sleeping as he walks in because he's so tired. And he's like, "Where's Stan at?" He's like, Stan's not coming. He's going with the public defender." And Vinny goes, oh, he's like, and Bill's like, I'm gonna go with the public defender too. And Vinny is crushed. He's like, why? He's like, if you had told me that you didn't have this much experience, you know, I probably would have went with you. And then Vinny convinces him. How? He convinces him with a magic trick. And I think it's awesome how he does. He basically tells him about, the public defender is going to let you lay these bricks. The prosecutor is going to let you put these bricks, and then he's going to build you these bricks and show you they have four corners, and then he's going to find out he has nothing to hold because you're innocent. He basically changes the card from the initial card he shows him. And this scene, it was pretty crazy. When I'm doing research, um, Pesci had to learn this. In the DVD commentary, Jonathan Lynn says, "Of course, you can fake anything by cutting and showing another shot." But I talked about this to Joe before we started shooting, and he learned how to do this card trick. So the scene in which he does it does not have any cuts. He actually fools the audience before their very eyes. He did it beautifully. I thought Vinny's argument would be less powerful if the audience would say, "Oh, well, that was fake," with the scene, and he does it great. Great job of it, Tone. What do you think about the magic trick here?
Again, that's the thing about Pesci in this is he's going humor, and then he's using in this, of course, skill again. And when you're doing it, like you said, I watch enough movies to know that you could tell if he was able to do it or not. And when you see him doing it, it's him doing it, which I think makes it awesome.
Yeah, it's a great scene. One of my favorites of the movie when he does it. Uh, Bill goes back and tries to convince Stan like he's gonna stay with Vinny. Stan again pushes back, saying he could fuck up the proceedings if we have him ask a question that the lawyers don't want you to ask. And he explains to him how Vinny is just being quintessential Gambini, how he ruined the life of a day of a famous musician called Alakazam because he knew everything he was about to do. Basically showing that Vinny is smarter than you think he is. He was just being Vinny at the time. So basically Bill saying, he's putting all his faith in his cousin. He can come through for us. And that's when Stan utters the line after he says the quintessential Gambini. We see the lights flicker, and Stan goes, "Well, there goes the quintessential Norton," the guy who was executed. And I think that's a great little play of words right there between the two. We then cut to talking to Trotter, and Vinny goes to meet Trotter to talk about, to discuss with the prosecutor, just basically to get a feel of the case. We find out how Vinny actually got into being a lawyer. He tells him about a judge he met called Judge Malloy, who, when he had gotten a traffic ticket against a cop, he thought was BS. He argued with the cop to eventually the cop to admit that he was wrong. The judge was cracking up during the whole time and basically asked him out to lunch and said, "You have a great career. You have a great career as a litigator." And Vinny says, "I don't even know what the hell a litigator was." And he said that Malloy was like a person that checked on him during law school and basically, was very proud of him because his own son didn't want to be a lawyer. He became a musician, which is kind of funny because Joe Pesci is a legit musician in real life.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like like a breaking the fourth wall there. So we kind of get the backstory of how Vinny became a lawyer, and we find out how Trotter became a public defender, a district attorney. He says he was defending people who were, horrible people, and he was making a lot of money, but his conscience was getting to him. I think it's like a good this scene right here is a good kind of like an opening of the characters' backgrounds, giving us some, but not too much. What I thought was a good, good opening for the background of the characters. What do you think, Tone?
Again, character development in the movie, especially as we're moving along here, they don't throw it all at you at once. Again, we've heard a lot in the movie already, and it's cool to still be getting more character development as we're going along.
Yes, and we also find, again, Vinny doesn't know the procedure of court. He there's a great scene where he is told by Trotter, "What are you doing later on today?" And he comes back to tell Lisa they're going hunting. And this interaction, is one of my favorite interactions when he's like, "What are you gonna go hunt?" And he's like, "I don't know." He's got some moose heads, some deer. He's like, a deer? And how can you kill a deer? He's like, I don't know. I'm a man's man. I could kill a deer. And he's trying to bond with him because Vinny believes that if he bonds with him, he can kind of get to know what Trotter knows about the trial, which is ridiculous if you think about it as lawyers, which we find out later. But my favorite scene is when she runs into the bathroom because she's disgusted he's going hunting for a deer. And he asks her, do you think these pants are okay? And she comes out and tells him, imagine you're this little deer and you see a nice lake and you put your little head close to the water. Then bam, a bullet rips through your fucking head and your braids are laying all over the floor. And she goes, at that time, do you really think you'd be thinking, do you be giving a shit about the pants the motherfucker was wearing? That whole scene, like, is hilariously done. Yeah.
It's great.
We then find out as they're driving to go hunting, he's like, oh, I really would like to see your files. And Trotter says you would. And he calls his secretary to have her photocopy all the files. He cuts into the next scene of Vinny coming in with the files. And Lisa is reading the law book and she sees him. She's like, you stole his files? He's like, no. Vinny tells her the story like he outsmarted Trotter, greasing him up. And she tells him he had to. It's called disclosure, dickhead. Which makes me laugh. She's like, oh, they didn't teach you that in law school either. And Vinny is like, oh my God, like what the hell? Which again shows he does not know what is going on. What do you think about that whole interaction, Tom?
Again, he's like a lot of the movie, he's like almost like stumbling upon what he's really supposed to be doing by accident, and it's going well, but he's also looks like he doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, I like that mix and match as it's going along.
Yeah, I think the chemistry between the two characters is just great.
It is.
And they spent a lot of time reading and doing research for this. A lot of the cast members hung out, but Pesci basically and Tomei actually made it look actually like a real relationship where they spent a lot of time together to try to get that chemistry going. I think they did an excellent job. We cut to now the picking of jurors, and this scene always made me laugh because as they're picking the jurors, Lane Smith, who plays Trotter, is asking a lady, about the death penalty, and she's like, "I think it should be up to the victims' families what happens to the person." And he says, "Oh, well, the defendants here are charged with shooting a clerk in the back in a cowardly way." And she's like, "Fry him." And he's like, "That'll do." And he gives the thumbs up. Now, this scene was actually taken out of a comedy book about law that Lawner had read. He told the Abnormal Use newspaper, the lawyers asked them their opinion on capital punishment, and they say something like, "I think it should be left to the victims' families." Then they describe exactly what the murderer did, and then the juror actually said, "Fry them." So I put that in the movie, which I think is hilarious how all these scenes that he's read about are incorporated into the scene.
That's good.
Then we find out Vinny is found to be a fraud by the judge because he's never tried a case in New York. The judge tells him, "I haven't found anybody with Vincent Gambini as a trial." He's like, "You're not going to find my name." He tells him the story of how he became a stage actor. And there was a guy named Vincent LaGuardia Gambini. He's like, "Maybe you heard of him." He's like, "No." He's like, "Well, I had to change my legal name to Jerry Gallo." And as he says Gallo, he knocks over the chess pieces the judge is playing with. And that was actually authentic. According to director Jonathan Lynn, the scene was so authentic and hilarious, he just left it in because he thought it was funny. And I think it shows like how much of a klutz Vinny is and like how you can tell he's uneasy.
Oh yeah.
We later find out as he's walking out, he tells Lisa what happened, and she's like, "Oh yeah, the big lawyer from New York." He's like, "Yeah, he's pretty prominent." He's like, "He was in the papers." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You didn't read the articles, right?" He's like, "No, because he's dead." So now we have the fact of Vinny being found out he never tried a case, which puts another layer of issues that are coming on. They then stay at the cabin of Trotter, who offered it to them because he told them about their sleeping issues. We see the famous scene of the biological clock here, where Lisa is upset that this trial is going nowhere. She doesn't know how to help. Her niece is getting married. They're supposed to be married. She feels like she's getting old, like everything's stretching out. And that's where Vinny finally blows his top and says, "I have 2 kids that are going to be in trial. I'm under pressure. I have a judge who's dying to put me in jail. He's like, I have trains, loud whistles." He goes, "Is there anything else you can put in this case?" And she's like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have brought this up." I love when they're about to go to sleep at night and we see this screeching owl just basically screaming, and Vinny jumps up and starts shooting off a handgun out of nowhere. So according to the director of this scene, the eastern screech owl in the scene in the woods was a real owl that had a little prior training, so it wouldn't be scared away by the gunfire. The crew got it to open its mouth by giving it little pieces of beef and artificially introduced the screeches that were added in post production. The owl's reaction to jumping when the gunshot are authentic, which I think is hilarious. Again, we found out this is something that really happened to the screenwriter when he was doing his research in the South. What do you think about this whole transaction? This whole transition of scenes with the biological clock and a screeching owl.
Again, Lynn's really good with the comic timing. I mean, a couple movies back, he does Clue, some really good comic timing in that. Just keeps it up, man. The movie's just keeping it going.
Yes, and then we got to the famous, as they hear the screeching owl, they decide to sleep in their car in the middle of a field, and Lisa's telling, "Oh, this is so romantic, all this sleeping under the stars," and he's like, "I don't see any stars," and we find out it starts pouring rain, and this is where we get the mud gag when they wake up in the morning, and he falls in the mud to get his suit out. He basically throws his suit in the mud. He has 30 minutes to get to court. They have to go find a cleaner. He has to take a shower. And he sees JT, who says he has the money, and he just jumps at him and punches him in the face and takes the money away, which kind of puts a cap on that whole scene. And he walks into court wearing the most ridiculous outfit, like a 1950s prom outfit that is velvet red. And when he walks in, the judge says, "Are you mocking me?" He's like, "No, I'm not mocking you." He tells him, I had a suit. You saw it. I tried to get it clean. Apparently, the cleaners have the flu, and it's the only one in the town. So he went to a secondhand store to get this suit. He goes, "For you." And he asks him, "Are you on drugs?" He's like, "No, I don't take drugs." And he gets held in contempt again, even though he tried to do right by the judge, which I think is pretty funny. We then see, which is one of my, thank you.
Mr. Gambini, are you mocking me with that outfit?
Great timing there, Tom, because that
I know I didn't want to speak over your words, but it was great you said it, and I was like, I think I got that one.
Yeah, that's a great one. We then see the great scene of the public attorney and the cross-examination of Mr. Tipton. Mr. Tipton says that he was basically making breakfast, and he saw two boys go into the sack of suds, and then he saw them running out as he was about to eat from the sack of suds. Director Jonathan Lynn cast his friend, again, Austin Pendleton, who had a real life stutter in this scene and was tongue-tied. Lynn went on to say, "I knew he would be really funny in this part." So he said, "But I really didn't quite imagine how funny, and I just had to literally hide behind the camera, normally sitting by the camera, but I had to hide because I was laughing so hard." This interaction between the public defender and Tipton, he's like, "Mr. Tipton." And I love the fact how he says, "You were 50 feet away. You couldn't see. I understand you have glasses." And he's like, "Yeah, they're reading glasses." It makes me laugh, like just even his opening statement, how he's trying to talk to the jurors and he's like slapping the guy on the shoulder to get his words out. And it's just it just shows like, Stan, again, because he's Stan saying, "What the hell I get myself into," going with the public defender that doesn't know what he's talking about. And then we see Vinny come up for his opening statement. He's half asleep. He comes up and says, "Everything that guy just said is bullshit." meaning what Lane Smith said, the Mr. Trotter. And he, that whole interaction is great. And then we see the interaction of how Vinny starts to kind of take a turn in terms of character development and the way he cross-examines a witness. Now, the public defender had a really hard time of cross-examining Mr. Tipton. He was starting the whole way, and we found out he tried to use his glasses, but we found out they were reading glasses. And when he sits down, he says, "He's a tough nut to break." But then he comes up and says, "Is it possible 2 yutes?" And the judge says, "What? The what? 2 yutes," which you had a great opening to the scene, Tone. That dialogue is real. It's actually something that happened between Lynn and Pesci. They were prepping for the film, and he said something about these 2 youths who were on trial. And I said, "What?" And he said, "What?" And I said, what's a ute limerick called? I realized as we were having this conversation that this is something that ought to happen between Vinny and the judge, so he wrote it that way when he did the rewrite, and it's a great scene. It's probably the most iconic scene of this whole film. But Vinny crushes it on the cross-examination. He says the famous line of, "What were you making for breakfast?" And Mr. Tipton says, "I was making grits." He goes, "Instant grits?" He goes, "No Southerner, proud Southerner makes instant grits." And he goes, "How do you like 'em, regular or al dente?" He goes, "Regular, I guess." So Vinny did research for this. Um, and then he says, "Well, how you said it took you 5 minutes to do your grits. How is it possible that you did grits in 5 minutes and to eat your breakfast when it takes every other person in the grit eating world 20 minutes?" Showing that there are reasonable doubts that it wasn't the same people he saw go in to the sack of suds and come out of the sack of suds. And he says, "I'm a fast cook, I guess." And that's when Vinny just unloads on him. He says, "Do the laws of physics not exist on your stove? Were these magic grits?" Where Brian brought up great line. "Were these magic grits from the same people that sold Jack his beanstalk beans?" We find out that Mr. Tipton did have holes in his story, which puts out reasonable doubt, which can help the defendants get off. And Stan comes to realization that he is, he wants Vinny and fires the public defender and goes with Vinny and says, "I want him." Vinny again is held in contempt, as we said earlier, for arguing with the judge with his ridiculous outfit. And the funny thing about this is he tells Lisa not to bail him out. He'll get a good night's sleep in jail. And they cut to him in jail, sleeping like a baby as there was a prison riot, which makes me laugh. The best part about this doing research for that is that scene where he's in jail was actually filmed the day after Joe Pesci won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Goodfellas. He actually brought it to the set, and Whitfield, actually, who plays Stan, said, Nobody touch it. It's bad luck to touch it." Kind of like the Stanley Cup. He's like, "It's bad luck to touch it. Don't touch it." So it's kind of funny that he brought the award to the set, and we later find out that Marissa Tomei would eventually win an award for her role in this film. Uh, we then cut to the discrediting of witnesses. We see him talk to one of the witnesses who had bushes and dirt in his house. He gets him to discredit him. We have Mrs. Riley, who is an older woman with very thick glasses. He basically pulls measuring tape and tells her, "How many fingers am I holding up?" to show that she couldn't recognize the people. And she says, the best part is when she says, about to answer, the judge says, "Let it be known that that the lawyer is holding up 2 fingers." He's like, "Your Honor," basically telling her the answer. And he's like, "Oh, sorry," which shows a more comedic, timing between the two. And he responds, "Okay, how many fingers am I holding up now, Mrs. Riley?" And only Mrs. Riley. And we cut to Fred Quinn giving like a fuck, like a fuck you face.
Uh-huh.
That whole interaction, like, what'd you think about the discrediting of witnesses and then him and the Tipton interaction?
These pictures of
My house and stuff.
house and stuff.
Again, man, it's great that they were able to really, because when we're talking about it like this, even there's not another movie like this, really, like a courtroom drama where the comedy is really, really, really good. I mean, we're not talking about Jury Duty here with Pauly Shore. I mean, this is, I think it's just the dialogue is where it's at. Whip smart dialogue.
Yeah, I love it. We then cut to since Vinny is killing it at court, we cut to Trotter calling him at night to tell him he has some evidence and an expert witness. So Trotter's phone call the night before the witness is in no way part of rules of discovery. To follow the proper rules, Trotter has to give the actual names either over the phone or fax or in person. Vinny's argument when they go to court about the surprise witness is valid, and this is the first time when they find out George Wilbur, who's played by James Reborn, who I love as a character actor, comes in from the FBI. He examines tire tracks and whatnot, and Vinny gives a great argument to the court case about why it's invalid, but it's overruled. But since he is overruled, this actually in reality would open up a doorway for him to call for a retrial, basically, because of this overruling. Basically, they'll have grounds for another trial if he ever found guilty, which I think is pretty crazy. Any contempt in court would be held in a small prison cell, in a courthouse, or in a cell at a sheriff's station, never at an actual prison. Any contempt of court that is by basically the contempt of courts he gets are like the prison cell, but again, the prison cells are actually shut down. Um, I love the whole interaction between him and the judge because it shows that Vinny is learning the court system and finding out what he can do to get his clients the best possible outcome. He would have excellent grounds again for appeal if since he was overruled. So that the whole growing of the Vinny character is very great here, Tone.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The exchange between the prosecutor and the automotive expert about the equipment used to analyze the tires was taken verbatim from an actual court transcript. The Hubert Packard Model 5710A with a flame analyzing detectors, the DEA quiped, "Does that thing come with turbocharged?" And the witness answered, "Only on the floor models." This appears in a lot of funny things said in court collections. Also, when my brother loves the scene where he says, "How are the tire tracks?" He goes, "They are identical." And he goes, "Identical," which always makes me laugh too. Lane Smith, another actor who's gone way too soon, was excellent in the role of Trotter. Vinny is then called, to talk to the witness, but a recess is called by the judge because we find out Jerry Gallo is dead. And Vinny says, "Jerry Gallo, he's dead." And he goes, "I was just about to tell you that." He goes, "My name is Callo, Callo." The judge gets frustrated and tries to call the clerk and finds out, he can call back after 3. So Vinny has to win this case within 90 minutes. This leads to him going to lunch with Lisa. He's looking at the photographs and he gets to a fight with her because she's saying, "How can she help?" And he says, "Nothing. You can really help me with nothing right now." He gets irritated to the point where he looks through the pictures she has. And as he's looking through the pictures, he's like, "Oh, yeah, me reading the book. Oh, what is this over here? Is these tire tracks? Can they be any more farther away? And what is that over there? Looks like dog shit. It's dog shit right there." And the final scene, interaction he goes into it with her is, "Oh my God, you cracked the case. It's me in the shower." It's basically a great interaction between the two, and she leaves and storms off, and he says he's sorry, as she storms off, but he's looking at the pictures. We come back to the court scene, and he tells him, "I found very little." And Vinny tries to spin the tale that there were two different people that drove to the same cars that basically made those tracks, which basically is not a great case. But when he goes to sit back down, the defense rests. The prosecution rests. The defense now has a chance to call their first witness. And while Vinny is sitting there, he notices something in the pictures. Asks for a recess, is granted it. Asks for 5 minutes, but granted 3 minutes. Runs over to Sheriff Farley and asks him to trace something. Who says, "Why?" He says, "I only have 3 minutes." Runs outside to see Lisa, who's on the phone. He's like, "We have to make up. I need you." And she's like, "F you." She pushes him away, goes outside. He basically carries her back into the courtroom. And they have the whole interaction of the needing to have her as an expert witness to challenge George Wilbur. I love that Lane Smith says, "I would like to vote there, Miss Mona Lisa." And the cinematic scene where Mona Lisa is brought to the courtroom as an expert witness in the automotive general knowledge section, it has been noted that Vinny had an alternative if Mona Lisa hadn't cooperated on a stand or she was disqualified. Remember, she was trying to leave by the court as a legal expert. Namely, while it's discouraged by standard attorney ethics in most situations, the rules of the court would have allowed Vinny to take the stand himself to testify as an expert in general knowledge because he could not have anticipated at the beginning of the trial that such knowledge would be relevant. So if she would have ran away and they wouldn't have made her stay, he could have actually done it, which I thought was an interesting little intricate part of the court procedure that I've learned while doing research for this. What do you think about that, Tom?
That would have, again, changed the dynamic a little bit of the film. And of course, Pesci being on the stand would have had fireworks too. But yeah, it's very interesting. Another interesting aspect.
Yeah, I love the cross-examination and with her and Lane Smith, where he tries to give her a faulty general knowledge about a car. She basically destroys him, and Vinny puts his feet out to like kind of like show off. Then Vinny brings up to her, it's the defense's argument that two different people driving the same car drove into the sack of suds, and she says, "No, that's not it. They were made by two totally different cars," which we later find out um, when he calls Sheriff Farley up. But first, he calls up George Wilbur to basically re-examine him and tell him that was everything Mrs. The Vito said was true, and he says yes. I love how he opens up the questions like, "She's cute, huh?" And he's like, very." He's so uncomfortable, but that shows that he's building the defense's case that what his expert witness said is real. Yes, the defense is wrong, which is a great line. After this, then they step down to find out that what Mona Lisa said was true. They call up Sheriff Farley, who comes back with some evidence showing that two perpetrators were picked up with a 357 Magnum with a Buick Skylark that was basically, I'm sorry, a Pontiac Tempest, which is basically confused with the Buick Skylark, another car that was picked with two other people that actually did the murder. We find out that the sheriff that picked up these two criminals was actually a sheriff that helped with the filming. So they gave him a little shout out in this scene, which I thought was pretty cool. We get the ending where they're asked if Mr. Trotter would like to continue. And he says that due to the recent evidence, the defense dismisses all charges. Vinny thinks he's going to get arrested as they try to run out of the courtroom. But we find out that his good old friend Judge Malloy made up a fake extensive resume of Jerry Callow. One of my favorite parts about this tone is that Vinny tells his cousin Ralph Macchio he's heading back to New York, and later in the same year he was lost in New York for Home Alone 2, which is funny. But we get a happy ending, and Vinny and Lisa argue in the car as they go off about their wedding, as he wants to marry her. Yes, Brian. Can anyone say Skylark without saying her accent? No, and I think that's what really pushed. Like, her character is so great. Their accent, it's not even a real New York accent. It's just like an exaggerated accent.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The film basically shows a lot of legal terminology. I know I went over a lot of legal terminology here, but it's a wealth of information as well as a great comedy. So that's our film breakdown. So what do you think about it?
I'm saying it's a classic. I'm saying it's a comedy classic. And after this dive, it's moving up very quickly into my comedy top movies. It's great.
Yep. So let's get into our critical reception and fan theories, my friend.
Let's do it.
You know that fat cocksucker says I look like the Shah of Iran?
Who does? Tony. I never got that at all.
So the film made $64 million on an $11 million budget. This was Joe Pesci's first film as a leading man to make money. And Brian brought this up earlier. He was in The Super, and that film did not make money. I like The Super, but it did not make money. This is the first film as a leading man that made him money, so it was a win-win for him. Marissa Tomei, like we mentioned earlier, won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for this film. Shortly after her Academy Award, a rumor started circulating around that Marissa Tomei had won by mistake because Jack Palance had incorrectly read out the wrong name. This is a highly unlikely occurrence, and this was proven to be a conspiracy theory because of what happened in the 2017 Oscars when Warren Beatty was given the wrong card and Faye Dunaway mistakenly announced La La Land as the best picture when the actual winner was Moonlight. The error was corrected and telecast in about 2 minutes. So that theory, even though it was a bad look for the Academy when the Moonlight La La Land issue happened, it kind of shows that she deserved to win the Oscar for her role. And like I said, she was phenomenal in this role. She makes the film. I think she's a better, I think she's a better character in the film than Vinny. But I love the dynamic, and I thought she did a great job. Brian asked, better Machiro, Crossroads or My Cousin Vinny? I would say Crossroads.
For
Yeah,
Machio's
yeah,
sake.
for Machio, yeah. That's a film I would love to do a deep dive into eventually. Underrated film.
Definitely.
But yeah, that's basically the Oscar that she won, and then she would go on to lose the Oscar when she moved, but she would eventually find it, which I thought was hilarious. Marissa Tomei. As far as the critics, Roger Ebert gave the film a thumbs up, but he only gave it 2.5 stars because he believed that Macchio was wasted. And my argument to that is Ralph Macchio is not really the star of the film.
No.
He plays like a side character. And I found it interesting that his partner Gene Siskel loved the film and gave it a higher rating and praised it with 2 thumbs up. But it's just strange how they viewed the film differently. This film is actually, like you mentioned earlier, Tony, it's praised by bunch of law schools. The American Bar Association's publication, the ABA Journal, ranked this film number 3 on its list of the 25 greatest legal movies. The Gambini's cross-examination of Sam Timpton with the great grits, Ernie Crane with the dirty windows, and Constance Riley with her glasses over, excuse me, represents technically the competent impeachment of a prosecutor's witness. Overall, the film does an excellent job through an abridged stuckness of representing the criminal justice process. Lawyer Maxwell S. Kennedy wrote for his blog Trial and Litigation, the movie is close to reality even in its details. Part of why this film has such a staying power among lawyers is because unlike, say, A Few Good Men, everything that happens in a movie could happen and often does happen at trial. Professor Alberto Bernabe of the John Marshall Law School, who hands his students a list of law movies organized by the category, puts Vinny under education, not because it provides material you can use in the classroom. Because it provides so much material you can use in the classroom. For example, you can use the movie to discuss criminal procedure, courtroom decorum, professional responsibility, unethical behavior, the role of the judge in a trial, efficient cross-examination, the role of expert witness, and effective trial advocacy. The film has been praised by the Circuit Court judge, referenced by Supreme Court Judge Anton Scalia, and made it into a legal textbook. So this film has such a big impact on the legal world. It's phenomenal, and that I love, that it was written from a person who wanted to find as much of legal information as he could in Dale Launer, and Jonathan Lynn, who's a former lawyer, wanted all the scenes to be as authentic to a courtroom as he could, and they paid off, man. This film is, loved by the legal community.
Sure is. That's what I find to be awesome about the movie is that it's not only a great movie, but they use the authenticity of what is necessary.
Yeah, I have a trouble saying that word too, my friend.
I know.
The funny thing is, Tom, there was a Bollywood version of this film. I'm not gonna pronounce it because I don't know how to say the words, but it's basically translated to "The Guy Is Fearless," and it was directed by Ravi Chopran and starred Giovita, Laura Dutta, and Samushmita Sen Chopra. It reached out to Fox in 2007 for the approval to produce the remake and was given permission to make a film loosely based on the original idea. In 2009, Fox sued them for the company because they said the remake was not approved and the script review showed to be a substantial reproduction of the US film with a identical storyline. They were basically settled with Fox paying the studio $200,000. To me, is funny. The film is so popular in pop culture, it was actually mentioned in football for Deflategate. Rudy Giuliani is the only person who has randomly referenced My Cousin Vinny during a press conference, which he has done, which is kind of funny because Rudy Giuliani is going through his own legal issues right now. But Bill Belichick said, "I would not say I am Mona Lisa Vito of the football world." As he said when asked about his football pressure. When she heard about this, Marissa Tomei texted Joe Pesci, and they both thought it was pretty funny about that Belichick would mention her name and My Cousin Vinny when referring to knowing about football pressure. So that's is like I said, this film is big pop culture. There was a planned sequel for this film. A sequel was discussed where Vinny Gambini would be practicing law in Britain. Unfortunately, Marissa Tomei did not like the script and she dropped out of the project. And attempts with another screenwriter to create a suitable story without her character went nowhere, to the point where their proposed film was canceled. However, in 2017, mystery writer Lawrence Kelter began a sequel novel called Back to Brooklyn, which has the further cases of Vincent Gambini as an attorney with Mona Lisa Vito serving as his investigator. This was intended to be the first of the My Cousin Vinny novel series, which is intended to be essentially a modern working of the class Italian American version of The Thin Man, a mystery series from 1934. So that book, I actually found it on Audible. I have an Audible subscription. I use one of my credits to purchase it. So I'm gonna listen to that when I get a chance. What do you think about the sequel possibility?
Again, she's not in it. I don't know if we're really, we're in Airplane 2. Sorry out there, not Larry, Caddyshack 2 type of territory of greatness in a sequel, possibly.
Yeah, I would like to see if Lana wrote a good script where like Vinny's practicing law and something else happens, that would have been nice, but she has to be in the film.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of been just let sleeping dogs lie, and just leave it the way it is. Last thing about the pop culture, Airplane 2 was a gem. Fried says Airplane 2 was a gem.
But
It's
The
a funny movie.
Natural Academy Award winning film is just so god awful, right?
Horrible film. No. So the funny part about this is I'll go and show fight you.
That'd be great. Like he just appears.
Yeah, so you see him like on a chair shot in the back.
He just punches me.
like Freddy Krueger when it's Johnny Depp, this is your Brady on drugs, and he just hits him with a frying pan. But the funny part about this is Joe Pesci actually reprised his character of Vincent LaGuardia Gambini, and he did so in a form of a musical album called Vincent LaGuardia Gambini Sings Just for You. Tone, have you heard this album?
Actually, no, but me and my old musical podcast, this might be a good one to do a deep dive.
So,
or a soundtrack.
It's not a great album. It has one song that's actually pretty decent, and it's called Wise Guy.
Ooh.
And it's him basically talking like him rapping basically. If you want, the music video is actually available on YouTube.
Oh, I'll be watching it.
Frank Vincent, who from The Sopranos and Billy Bats from Goodfellas, is actually in the video with Joe Pesci. It's pretty funny. You should check it out. It's funny that he did it. I actually listened to it when it came out because I was like, "What is this?" And it made me laugh. But definitely check it out. It was on TRL, I think, for an episode. Somebody requested it, and it's just weird to see Joe Pesci rapping, even though he is a singer. So we have one fan theory, Tom, and I want to know what you think about it. So this fan theory is from the universe of Reddit from Shadow Ops 84. He says, "I believe that Sheriff from My Cousin Vinny is Daniel Simpson, D-Day from Animal House." He says they're played by the same actor, but Sheriff Fario looks the right age to be D-Day 30 years later. Also, the epilogue to Animal House states that D-Day's current whereabouts are unknown, and the last time he was seen, he was driving away in a stolen police car. D-Day clearly disappeared and created a new identity for himself, much easier to do in the 1960s, moved to Alabama, and became a law enforcement officer. What do you think about that, man?
Right now, I want to do the part from Animal House. He's like, doodaloo, 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 doodaloo. But man, that I actually, out of all our fan theories, it's a pretty cool one. Because but like again, it's I don't know, but it's cool. I like it.
Yeah, it's not completely out there. It's plausible. So that was a good fan theory. There's some of these films are kind of hard to find fan theories. So like especially like the biopics, but that's actually a really good one. So final thoughts on the film, Tone. I know we went through a lot of information. I know I spoke for way too long. But what's your final thoughts of the film? Like, did this whole review make you want to watch it again? Did you want to make you do a more in-depth analysis? Like now that you have more in-depth analysis, did it make you have a different outlook of the film?
Yeah, it makes me want to do a huge outlook. I'm going to be watching Crossroads when I get off of here, and I looked it up. It's on Tubi for free. But back to the movie. I mean, Tomei, Pesci, Bruce McGill. Just to be honored to talk about Bruce McGill I love Bruce McGill so much. Fred Gwynn, Macchio. Again, just an all-around great cast. In high school, somebody called me. They said that I look like Ralph Macchio and weight gainer. So I've always had a really affinity to Ralph Macchio. So Ralph and the rest of the cast, I think the movie holds up. And as a comedy, I think it's a little bit better than like a Jim Carrey movie, which I like Dumb and Dumber and that, but it's a little more smarter, as you stated, the way he's able to finally get ahead on the trial while not getting in trouble or figuring out who he really is, I think is key to the movie.
Yeah, couldn't say any better. I totally agree with you. One of my favorite films. Definitely a lot of, like I said, a lot of legal stuff in it, but very entertaining. It's one of those films that it is a slow burn, but very, very entertaining. I've been told I look like a young Brian. Oh my God, Brian. But that is our film breakdown. We went through the development, the film breakdown, and we went through critical reception and fan theories for My Cousin Vinny. So My Cousin Vinny is in the can. But let's go into our final little segments here, and let's talk about what's coming soon.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Coming soon.
Próximamente.
Coming soon.
Coming soon.
So, my man, what is coming soon, Tone?
All right. Well, we got coming up here for the next 2 weeks is we're going to talk about some Oscar stuff coming up. This next week, we're going to pick some Oscar years, and we're going to have some fun with it and pretty exciting stuff. As we go throughout the week, we'll kind of explain what we will be doing. We're going to pick 5 specific years, and kind of, as you were stating, we're going to kind of, we're going to kind of say some of the more, like as you stated, the
uncanny, like more of the unexpected Oscar winners.
So we want to look into maybe some things that we didn't think would win and then ended up winning, and or
things with that one that we thought should have, somebody else should have won.
There you go.
So we'll be picking, and it'll be in different categories. It'll be 5 totally different picks from each of us. Who knows, we might actually pick the same year for one of them. But yeah, we're gonna go through that for the Oscars, and then eventually we will have a Oscars, basically an Oscars. So our picks for the upcoming Oscars on March 10th. So we actually have some shows that are actually kind of lining up, coming that are, I don't want to give away our next show after our Oscar breakdown, not this one, but the week after our Oscar breakdown, because that one's going to be a fun one, and it's a movie that me and you both love. But yeah, we got some Oscar talk coming the next 2 weeks, and then we have another great show coming up after that. But since you know what's coming soon, there's only one more other segment to go with, and that's the Sugar Baggy soundtrack pick of the week.
The Sugar Baggy soundtrack pick of the week.
Well, we're going to jump. Well, first, I'm going to quiz you here. I'm going to play a clip, and I'm going to see if you know what it's from. But this is kind of a little bit of connection to something that we were talking about a little bit even further down the road that's exciting that you're looking forward to. But what's this from? You might not know it. It's okay if you don't. Here it is. Do you remember what soundtrack Hole doing Gold Dust Woman was on? If you don't, we're talking about down the road doing The Crow. This is the follow-up soundtrack to The Crow City of Angels. Not as good as The Crow 1 soundtrack, but still. White Zombie doing I'm Your Boogeyman. That one kind of stuck in my head. You got Hole, you got Filter, you got PJ Harvey, you got Toadies, you got Iggy Pop. Again, nowhere near as strong as the first one, but for some reason it was after Courtney Love didn't look like she did on the other album. She cleaned up a little bit, and
Celebrity
hear a little different Gold Dust Woman. And what's ironic is I was just like, in my head, I'm just like, City of Angels, The Crow, and we'll never be possibly talking about City of Angels, but why not talk about this soundtrack? Check it out.
I actually like the City of Angels. It's not that bad. Iggy Pop's in it too, which just makes me laugh.
Yes. Again, I do have to rewatch it because I did see this one in the theater, and I don't think I've seen it in 20-something years. So
yeah, it's not
the
original. I mean, if we talk to Brian, the original is horrible, but it's not the original, but it's not a horrible rendition of The Crow. I think the ones that come after this are bad.
The one with what's his name is really bad.
Ever Furlong. Yeah, Johnny Corvo. His name was Johnny Corvo or something in the movie.
So bad.
Yeah, but the one thing that is consistent with the films is they have excellent soundtracks. So I will check this out. Actually, I'll look this up and see if I can listen to it on Apple Music.
Do it.
But good pick, man.
Thank you.
So that is our show for the week. I know we went a little long on this, but I mean, I got talking about My Cousin Vinny, and I love the film, so I continue to ramble. But if you guys like the film breakdowns, or you want something changed with the film breakdowns, let us know at the Show Pod on Twitter. Be sure to check us out on the SadisticPenguinStudios.com. We have our blogs. CPG just released a great thing about Cody Rhodes. Tony is killing it over at the Hookup on Music. He just went live every Wednesday. He had a great guest with Bruhan Luke. They talked Pearl Jam. You guys talked Eagles. You guys talked all sorts of music, man. I love that episode. I was listening to it while I was here.
It was a really, really good time.
Of course, Luke had to get a little bit of talking, a little bit of the dead in there. It was a really good episode. Just two guys chatting. Be sure to check it out. Luke's gonna be releasing something with the college football scene. Also check out Brian's Getting Drafty pod. He just did a great episode picking the wrestling's worst gimmicks, and that was a fun episode with Dougie Fresh from the Chicago Sports Bums, as well as our good friend Shankster, one of our biggest supporters on there. Who else is on there? And our own CPG, Comic Punk guy, fellow Penguin, who did a great job on it. That was a good, fun episode. So we had some really good stuff this week. We have some more good stuff coming in soon. So be sure to check us out on the website and check out our YouTube at Sadistic Penguin YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe there. Any closing thoughts, Tom?
You know what's been in my head since last week? This. And honestly, I'll shout out to Brian. I've been nothing but listening to the Los Lobos versions of the Richie Valens songs, and he is right. They do really kill, and they're really awesome, and that's a great soundtrack too. So honestly, this whole next week it'll be My Cousin Vinny in my head until we see you again. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. You have a good night, and we'll be back next week with some more Oscar talk.
Thanks for listening to the At the Show podcast, a Sadistic Penguin Studios production.
Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Maybe we could build a fire, sing a couple of songs, huh? Why don't we try that?